line, and people are stuck in traffic very badly. So every time as rain go down in Mumbai, this situation happens, and every year BMC claims that they had prepared genuinely this time, and the same story happens. We had seen waterlogging at some places in Mumbai because it's raining very heavily now. Weather department had also given orange alert for today and tomorrow also, and they had predicted that it will be a very, very, very heavy rainy day for Mumbai and Maharashtra till tomorrow. So, on another hand, commuters are facing a lot of problems because this is a peak hour, and they are traveling. And Western Express Highway is the busiest road in Mumbai because everyone travels from there. It has a major way that can go in several directions. So right now, situation in Mumbai is very difficult for the commuters because there are traffic situations also. There are some places where waterlogging has taken place and heavy rain are just disturbing Mumbai.
Can you give us details, Paras, on any advisory that's been put out by the authorities, by the Mumbai police perhaps, on roads that have been closed off because of waterlogging?
Right now, the rain was little slow down, so that's why there was no advisory as now. But people have been told to not venture outside because it can rain very heavily in some time. Throughout the day, it can rain very heavily, so there are no such advisory has been given. But we can expect that in some time there will be, because it has started raining very heavily in Mumbai. There was some time before where rain has just stopped, but right now from last 20-25 minutes it has again started pouring down. So we can expect some advisory soon. But for some time it has been also told that not to venture outside if you don't have any work.
All right, Paras getting us those details right now on the situation in Mumbai. Thanks for those details, Paras. As we're telling you about the kind of traffic snarls that are being reported in several parts of Mumbai, the Met Department has predicted that the heavy rains will continue in Mumbai and its suburbs. In the last few hours itself, we've seen a downpour, leaving many parts of the city flooded. A landslide also was reported in Vasai, close to Mumbai, where many people are feared trapped, along with houses being damaged. Rescue officials have so far pulled out 2 people from the site, 3 still believed to be stuck under the debris. The NDRF is at that site leading the rescue operations. So far, no casualties have been reported, and let's hope it stays that way. The administration in Thane as well as Palghar districts of Maharashtra have alerted villages near riverbanks, warning them of a possible overflow. The landslide in Vasai isn't unfortunately the first incident that's occurred due to the incessant rains. On Tuesday, 3 people died in Nagpur district. And it's unfortunately not just Maharashtra but several other states that are grappling right now with torrential rains. Let's get you all the defining images coming in. Mumbaikars woke up to rain lashing several parts of the financial capital. Heavy downpour led to waterlogging in the city, bringing Mumbai almost to a standstill. Chhattisgarh's Sukma district has been devastated by the monsoons. Villagers can be seen wading through waist-deep water, trying to relocate from their houses that are inundated. With incessant rains in Bhopal, rainwater gushed into Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia's bungalow. The water entered the home that was recently allotted to him. In Telangana, a red alert was declared by the Met Department and the state has been on high alert. You can see water levels have been going up at an exponential rate. Schools have been shut for 3 days by the government. In Uttarakhand's Pittorgarh, you can see that children are forced to cross the river to escape from heavy rainfall. Heavy rains have been wreaking havoc, leading to roadways also being shut. And let's get you more details on what the situation is in different parts of the country this monsoon. The state of Gujarat is right now one of the worst affected. 69 deaths have been reported in rain-related incidents in the last few days. Rescue operations in certain parts of the state have also been intensified to prevent further loss of lives. For the next 5 days, light to moderate rainfall is expected in the entire state. Extremely heavy rainfall is expected in many districts of South Gujarat, in Saurashtra and Kutch. Other badly hit states are Telangana, where a red alert has been issued in Nalgonda, Suryapet and Jangam. In neighbouring Andhra, a second warning has been issued in Dholeshwaram Barrage. Maharashtra has also seen the wrath of monsoons to the extent that an orange alert has been issued in Mumbai, a red alert in Kolhapur and Palghar, similar alert in Kerala, where an orange alert has been issued in northern districts. We'll get you all the latest ground reports from all of the states that have been affected by the monsoon. On the other side of a short break, we're focusing on what's playing out in Sri Lanka as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled to Maldives in a military jet.
Traveling from different parts.
Armed with facts,
Looking at political back.
she takes the news by its horns.
Do you think the future of these students are not hampered?
Fierce, bold and direct, setting the tone for the biggest stories. From every corner and every angle. Expect nothing but the unfiltered truth.
News first, niceties later. Watch me, Nabila Jamal, on India Today.
You are watching India Today. watching India Today.
Sri Lanka's embattled president has now fled out of his country amid all of the massive protests that we've been seeing for the last few days. Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled Lanka on a military jet and arrived in the capital city of Malé in Maldives at around 3 a.m. that was local time. The Sri Lankan Air Force has confirmed that he fled with his wife as well as 2 security officials. The Air Force aircraft was provided for the President, for the First Lady and, as I mentioned, 2 security officers following a request by the existing government. Considering that Rajapaksa is still President, he has executive powers, and using that, he requested for that jet. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, we're being told, is going to now head to UAE from Maldives. It's only a brief stopover in Maldives. He'd earlier conveyed a message to the Speaker and the Prime Minister that he will be submitting his resignation today. Rajapaksa was evacuated from the President's house back on July 9th before it was stormed by protesters. India, meanwhile, has denied reports doing the rounds that we facilitated Gotabaya's travel to Maldives. In the Indian High Commission in Colombo, in a statement, has categorically said that we stand by the people of Sri Lanka and had no role whatsoever in his exit.
It's D-Day in Sri Lanka as the Sri Lankans are waiting for the official announcement of their President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's resignation, and that too from the Speaker as earlier mentioned. However, gathered in large numbers outside the President's Secretariat, the President's Palace and the Prime Minister's residence are waiting for this resignation, and this comes at the moment because earlier on 9th the public stormed these buildings, but since then they are waiting for the announcement as Gotabaya already informed that he will resign on 13th of July as a form of claiming that this is a way of transition of power. But it looks like Gotabaya wanted to take the time to leave the country because he was absconding since then. However, information also has trickled down that he tried to leave the country on 12th of July, but apparently the immigration officials at the airport did not cooperate, because of which he had to lose multiple flights. And even on camera, his relative Basil Rajapaksa was also caught quarreling with passengers.
I'm cutting across straight to Ashutosh Mishra. He's joining us live from Colombo, where protests continue. Ashutosh, over to you.
Well, Akshita, the police is firing on the protesters. They were suddenly started marching toward the Prime Minister's residence. Multiple tear shells and air, the shots in the air is being fired here in Colombo. Suddenly, I saw all the protesters walking. The moment they got to know that President has fled, now they're demanding Prime Minister to resign. This is the Prime Minister's office. They all started marching. There was a barricade. They're just trying to breach the barricade. Suddenly they started firing tear shells. Look at the other side. It's all multiple tear shells. This is to disperse the crowd. Look at these amount of tear shells fired here in Colombo. Exactly what unfolded on 9th July. Similar pictures we are seeing at Ground Zero here in Colombo. These protesters now covering their face, because with this is how they're preventing themselves from the smoke. All are just taking their clothes away and covering the face. So there were multiple directions where the shots were fired, even the bullets, and this was an attempt to disperse the crowd once they started marching towards the Prime Minister's office. There you see, again there's another, look, once again armed forces, the STF is trying to disperse the crowd. It's barely to see anything. So this is exactly the similar picture again in Colombo, what unfolded on 9th of July. The protesters want they will even gonna take over the Prime Minister's house and Prime Minister's office. So this is exactly what happened on 9th of July. And it's very difficult to see anything here. All I see only the chaos. And the
yes, I can see tear gas also being fired around you. So be careful. Do you need a moment also to catch your breath?
There a few thousands came, but suddenly there is an attempt to disperse it. Thousands from the Gale phase protest, which was the epicenter. Yet again, they are coming. And that's in a huge number. The entire protest side has been vacated and evacuated, and now the protesters. This requires.
Ashutosh, I'm going to give you a moment. Because Ashutosh was there. His eyes are burning because of the tear gas that was fired right now at the crowds. I'm going to give Ashutosh a second there to ensure that he can kind of get that out of his system. But you can see the kind of chaos that's playing out right now with many of these protesters attempting to march, holding a peaceful protest, but they were fired upon, tear gas being fired at these protesters. Ashutosh is reporting from the heart of the action there, as many of these civilians are trying to push forward. They're clearly getting more agitated.
लगभग वही तस्वीर एक बार फिर देख रहे हैं तमाम प्रदर्शनकारी। जैसे ही पता चला कि राष्ट्रपति देश छोड़कर जा चुके हैं, उसके बाद ये लोग नाराज होकर प्रधानमंत्री आवास और उनके घर की ओर भागे। और अब आप जो देख पा रहे हैं, यहाँ पर पुलिस ने उनको रोकने की कोशिश की, बैरिकेड तोड़ दिया गया, पहला बैरिकेड तोड़ दिया गया है। और ये हजारों की संख्या में प्रदर्शनकारी, पीछे मैं कैमरामैन को हाथ से पीछे से आर्मी की बस आ रही है। ये सेना को बुलाया गया फिर से, पहले कपड़े मार गए, आगे फिर से देखिए ये श्रीलंकन सेना है जो अब आगे बढ़ रही है और प्रदर्शनकारियों ने रोक दिया है। सेना की बस को यहीं पर रोक दिया गया है। ये सेना की बस है, आगे बढ़ रही थी ताकि भीड़ को तितर बितर किया जाए। और वहां से हवाई गोलियां और साथ में टीयर शेल लगातार फायर किया जा रहा है। और ये इसलिए ताकि देखिए यहाँ से भी फिर टीयर शेल, लगातार टीयर शेल दागे जा रहे हैं। ये भी देखना मुश्किल है कि आखिर आ कहाँ से रहा गोला। प्रदर्शनकारी आग बुझा रहे हैं, गीले कपड़े डाल रहे हैं उस पर। और ये 9 जुलाई को बिल्कुल यही कुछ कोलंबो के सड़कों पे हुआ था। दरअसल ये सारे लोग नाराज थे, प्रधानमंत्री रानिल विक्रमसिंघे के घर जा रहे थे, उनको रोकना चाहते थे और चाहते थे कि वो इस्तीफा दे। लेकिन जब तक वो पहुंचे, पुलिस ने डिस्पर्स करने के लिए पहले गोलियां चलाई, टीयर शेल चलाए। और जब ये भागे तो उनको देखते हुए गले पे जो प्रोटेस्ट साइडें दिखे, लगातार यहाँ पे टीयर गैस छोड़े जा रहे हैं। दरअसल प्रदर्शनकारियों को एक चौराहे पर घेरने की कोशिश है। देखिए उसके पीछे भी हजारों लोग हैं और ये लगातार आप देख पा रहे हैं जो गोले की, यहाँ पर देखना कोई भी मुश्किल, आंखें जल रही होंगी सबकी। लेकिन प्रदर्शनकारियों ने कपड़े उतारे, वो देखिए वहाँ पर किसी का घर है, वहाँ से पानी ले लिया और सबके कपड़े उतार के उन्होंने गीले किए ताकि आंखों को बचाया जा सके। 9 जुलाई की तस्वीर एक बार फिर श्रीलंका की सड़कों पर जिंदा हो उठी है। और अब ये लोग संसद पर प्रधानमंत्री रानिल विक्रमसिंघे का जो घर है वहाँ और उनके दफ्तर पर जाना चाहते हैं, लेकिन पुलिस ने उन्हें आगे नहीं जाने दिया। कुछ वही तस्वीरें जो 9 जुलाई को दिखाई दी थी। लेकिन प्रदर्शनकारियों का बड़ा धड़ा देखिए, आगे तोड़ दिया, बैरिकेड तोड़ करके आगे पहुंच चुका है। और अब पहला बैरिकेड टूटा है, आगे और भी बैरिकेड लगाए गए हैं और रोकने की कोशिश हो रही है, लेकिन सारी कोशिशें नाकाफी साबित हो रही हैं। यहाँ कुछ भी देख पाना मुश्किल है। ये एक टीयर शेल ठीक मेरे पास गिरा, बिल्कुल यहाँ पे कुछ भी देख पाना यहाँ पर मुश्किल है। और ये इसलिए है ताकि सेना को यहाँ से, जहाँ सेना की जो बस फंसी है, इनको जाने का मौका दिया जाए। इसलिए देखिए उधर से एक तरफ से लोगों को रोका तो यहाँ से हजारों फिर एक बार पहुंच चुके हैं। कुछ भी देख पाना इस समय यहाँ पर मुश्किल है। ये सेना की बस जो है पीछे पलट रही है ताकि वो दूसरे इलाके की ओर जा सके। ये एक प्रदर्शनकारी लेकर एक शायद बच्चा यहाँ पे घायल हुआ है। सबसे ज्यादा होगी ताकि आंखें साफ करें।
Violent protests that are happening right now. You see a lot of chaos playing out. These are frustrated protesters over the fact that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled but hasn't resigned yet. There are clashes that it seems have broken out with the police officials present there. Ashutosh is still reporting. I want to cut across live to him.
मैं कि यहाँ पर ये गोली चलाए, पूरी संभावना है कि यहाँ पर गोली चलाए। सेना को यही बस से उतार दिया गया है, फर्स्ट लाइन डिफेंस बना दिया गया है और पूरी संभावना है कि सेना यहीं से प्रदर्शनकारियों को रोक ले। देखिए सब बस से उतर के पहली डिफेंस यही बना दी। हजारों की संख्या में प्रदर्शनकारी पहले ही ये इलाका छोड़कर आगे भाग चुके हैं। जो बचे हैं वे उनको यहाँ रोकने की कोशिश है, लेकिन ये संख्या बहुत ज्यादा है। ये देखिए एक सैनिक है, ये एक सेना का जवान है जिसके आंख में टीयर शेल गया है, वो उनकी मदद कर रहे हैं, तमाम प्रदर्शनकारियों की मदद कर रहे हैं। खुद सेना के ही जो जवान हैं वो उनको पानी दे रहे हैं, आंखों में जलन है तो वो मदद कर रहे हैं। ये हमने तस्वीरें देखी थी कि कैसे जो सेना को लेग थे वो खुद इस प्रदर्शन को समर्थन करने के लिए सड़कों पर आ गए थे। और यहाँ पर भी हम फिर वही तस्वीर देख रहे हैं कि जो सैनिक हैं वही लोगों की मदद कर रहे हैं, उनको पानी दे रहे हैं। ये जो तस्वीर है ये श्रीलंका के आंदोलन में इतिहास लिखी जाएंगी। ये देखिए, कहा तो इन्हें रोकना था, ये लगा कि शायद ये फायर करेंगे, लेकिन ये जो लोकतंत्र की तस्वीर है ये सिर्फ श्रीलंका में दिखाई दे पाती। इनको पता है कि कैसे आग बचाई जा सकती है। हमारे कैमरामैन की भी मदद की उन्होंने, ताकि आंखों की ये जलन दूर की जाए। सबने हथियार नीचे कर दिए हैं। प्रदर्शनकारी अब आगे की ओर बढ़ रहे हैं। बस यहाँ से पीछे जा रही है, बस यहाँ से पीछे की ओर जा रही है। और शायद ये खुला संकेत है सेना की ओर, इन जवानों की ओर से भी, कि वो हाथ नहीं उठाएंगे अपने लोगों पर, लोकतंत्र। और सबने हथियार नीचे कर दिए हैं। शायद इन्होंने तय किया कि फायर नहीं करेंगे। हमने पहले भी देखा था 9 जुलाई को भी कई सारे पुलिसकर्मी ATS के जो लोग थे वो उन्होंने हथियार डाल दिए थे, वो नीचे वो हट गए थे रास्ते से और उन्होंने जाने दिया। ये तमाम प्रदर्शनकारी सीधे प्रधानमंत्री आवास और उनके घर की ओर जाते हुए रानिल विक्रमसिंघे के दफ्तर और उनके घर की ओर बढ़ रहे हैं। दरअसल ये गुस्सा है कि राष्ट्रपति कैसे देश छोड़कर गए और जिसके लिए उन्होंने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में याचिका डाली थी। अचानक यहाँ कहा जा रहा है कि दरअसल कब्जा करना है। अब ये प्रधानमंत्री आवास और प्रधानमंत्री के घर पर कब्जा करने के लिए आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। ये जो तस्वीर है श्रीलंका के इतिहास में लिखे जाएंगी, कैसे एक शासक के खिलाफ इस तरह की तस्वीरें कोलंबो की सड़कों पर देखने को मिली है। और ये देखिए, ये वो बैरिकेड है, क्या हाल किया लोगों ने इस बैरिकेड का। ये बैरिकेड यहाँ पुलिस ने लगाई थी, बैरिकेड तोड़ दिया, दूसरा बैरिकेड को पूरी तरह से इसको पलट दिया गया है। यहाँ अगर कुछ देखने को मिल रहा है तो वो है लोगों का गुस्सा, क्या लड़के हो, क्या लड़कियाँ हो, युवा हो, जिस संख्या में ये सब आगे भाग रहे हैं। हालांकि टीयर शेल अब उसको रोक दिया गया है।
गंदा आदमी है उन लोग को। अब लंका में
वेयर आर यू गोइंग?
आई एम गोइंग टू पार्लियामेंट।
रीजन
इसका अंदर वो रखेगा ना, वो उन लोग को पूरा गंदा आदमी है।
आप लोग पार्लियामेंट में आते हैं, पार्लियामेंट में बैठने वाले हैं,
पार्लियामेंट बैठने वाले पूरा गंदा आदमी। उन लोग को खुद से काम करेगा। उन लोग प्रेसिडेंट है ना, वो खुद से काम करेगा।
आज किस बात की नाराजगी है आप लोगों में?
वो जाएगा बोलेगा, आज जाएगा बोलेगा। अभी 3 दिन हुआ उसको घर पूरा में लंका भी,
और उन्होंने इस्तीफा नहीं दिया।
उसको जाएगा बोला, अभी उसका लंका में तो नहीं है। उसको बाहर में किधर मालूम।
को लगता है सरकार ने भगाया उनको यहाँ से,
सरकार में भगाया, वो छुपा के रखेगा।
इस बात की नाराजगी है आपको?
इस बात की नाराजगी, वो जाएगा बोला, क्यों अभी तक जाएगा नहीं है, इसलिए इतना नाराज।
ये देखिए, हम एक तरफ से देख रहे थे कि ये हजारों की संख्या में समर्थक थे, अचानक वो दूसरे किस रास्ते आए मेरे लिए समझना मुश्किल है। मैं दूसरी तरफ देख रहा हूँ, ये बड़ा सा जमावड़ा है। उधर भी करीबन हजारों की संख्या में जो युवा प्रदर्शनकारी थे, वो ये देखिए, ये पत्थर है, ये इस तरह के निशान है। दरअसल इनको रोकने की सारी कोशिश हुई थी। यहाँ पर भी पत्थर, शीशे के टुकड़े में सब कुछ देख पा रहा हूँ। सबसे ज्यादा कोशिश की गई थी हवाई फायरिंग से इनको डराने की, रोकने की। इतनी संख्या में एक साथ टीयर गैस चलाए गए, लेकिन उसके बाद भी इन प्रदर्शनकारियों का मनोबल नहीं तोड़ पाई सरकार, ना ही यहाँ की पुलिस। हालांकि वो तस्वीरें भी जब सेना को बुलाया गया, प्रदर्शनकारियों ने सेना की बस को रोक दिया, इस पर चलेंगे, लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी वो माने नहीं। और फिर बाद में हमने देखा कि यही प्रदर्शनकारी जो हैं वो लगातार उनकी मदद करने लगे, उन्हें आंखों में, उनकी आंखें जो जल रही थी उनको पानी देने लगे। ये जो तस्वीर हम देख पा रहे हैं श्रीलंका में 9 जुलाई को ये जो गुस्सा था वो इसलिए कि राष्ट्रपति का इस्तीफा हो, लेकिन जब ये नहीं हुआ, सब्र का बांध टूट गया लोगों का। हालांकि स्पीकर ने भी हमसे बातचीत करते हुए जो जानकारी दी थी स्पीकर के दफ्तर ने, कि वो आज इंतजार करेंगे कि इस्तीफा हो जाए, लेकिन ऐसा कुछ भी हुआ नहीं। आपने प्रदर्शनकारियों को सुना कि उनको रानिल विक्रमसिंघे पर भी भरोसा नहीं हुआ, इसीलिए उनको लगता है कि संसद में भी शायद उन्हें न्याय नहीं मिल गया। इसलिए तमाम सारे लोग पहले संसद और फिर प्रधानमंत्री रानिल विक्रमसिंघे के घर की ओर जाना चाहते हैं। You know, the president was about to resign. He did not submit the resignation. Why you people are marching towards the parliament and the prime minister?
Because we don't like Mr. Ranil going to be president.
But there is no announcement that Vikramsinghe will be the president.
Actually, we don't know real update.
Is it a situation of confusion?
Sorry?
Is it a situation of confusion?
Yeah, we are all confused.
Because there is no official communication from the authorities, from the speaker or the prime minister. Perhaps people believe that Ranil Wickremesinghe could be the next president of this country. However, when president resigns, it is the constitutional under Section 40 of Sri Lanka that itself empowers Prime Minister to be the interim president until new president is elected in the parliament. But here, the people believe that Ranil Wickremesinghe could be the president for next 6 months until there is a fresh elections. And that perhaps there is anger against him as well. The people do not want him to see as the next president. And that seems to be the confusion, bringing thousands of these protesters. Remember the Gale Face protest. This has been running for 96 days. Today is the 96th day of the protest in Colombo, particularly the Gale Face. These protesters, young boys and girls, senior citizens, women, men, all across Colombo and the other provinces, other districts have been gathering at Colombo. And today seems they ran out of their patience and now they are marching. Well, there you can see the STF, the Special Task Force with the shield, the protection shield. They are trying to stop these protesters yet again. This could escalate another round of scuffle between the protesters and the armed police. And that exactly where you see the last line, that's exactly the Prime Minister's office. And next to that is Ranil Wickremesinghe's residence. And now these protesters have crossed the barricade. They again breached another safety barricade. Seems they all are trying to enter Ranil Wickremesinghe's residence, Prime Minister's another office and the parliament. This is another showdown by the protesters, by Sri Lankans, the ordinary civilians. Almost the nation is on the verge of... Oh, there's a tear shell fired, another tear shell. This is to disperse the crowd. And barely one can see where these tear shells are coming from. Multiple rounds are being fired. This is to disperse the crowd and send them to multiple places because the gathering at one place could overpower the authorities. These are the burning images here, what we are seeing in Colombo. Similar picture unfolded on 9th of July. Yet again, battle on the streets in Colombo. The tear shells constantly stop these protesters, but number of these young boys and girls are so much that they can overpower these authorities here. ये तस्वीरें कोलंबो की सड़कों पर ठीक प्रधानमंत्री के औपचारिक दफ्तर के पास और जहां रानिल विक्रमसिंघे का घर है, बड़ी संख्या में पहुंचे हैं। मैं आगे देख पा रहा हूं ये स्पेशल टास्क फोर्स है जो यहाँ की पैरामिलिट्री कह लीजिए या आर्म्ड पुलिस जो वहाँ पर खड़ी तो है शील्ड के साथ, डंडों के साथ, लेकिन प्रदर्शनकारियों को रोकने के लिए लगातार टीयर शेल फायर किए जा रहे हैं। ये कहाँ से आ रहे हैं ये देखना भी बड़ा मुश्किल हो रहा है, लेकिन ये कोशिश इसलिए कि इनको रोका जा सके, लेकिन बात हाथ से निकल गई है। बहुत सारी इतनी संख्या में है कि इनको रोक पाना शायद श्रीलंका की सेना, तमाम सेना, पुलिस और आम सशस्त्र बलों के लिए भी संभव नहीं है। और यहाँ तक कि कई सारे लोग कहीं ना कहीं इनके समर्थन में ही है क्योंकि वो सब इस प्रदर्शन का हिस्सा है। टीयर शेल नारे जो लग रहे हैं गोटा गो होम यानी राजपक्षे इस्तीफा दे, लेकिन जब इस्तीफा नहीं हुआ वो देश छोड़कर चले गए, तब आप जो देख रहे हैं वो तस्वीर देखिए जिनकी आंखों में टीयर शेल गए। यहाँ जैसे टीयर शेल फायर हुआ है सब अपनी आंखों को धो रहे हैं ताकि इस जलन से बचा जा सके। आंखों को धोने की कोशिश, जिन लोगों के घर है सबने दरवाजे खोल दिए हैं। देखिए पानी की पूरी पाइपलाइन है, इसको ब्रीच कर दिया गया है, ये इसलिए ताकि पानी मिल सके लोगों को। और जैसे आप आगे बढ़ते हैं दरअसल गला और आंखें बुरी तरह चोक कर देती हैं टीयर शेल, ताकि प्रदर्शनकारी बेचैन और वो जाएं, लेकिन शायद ही कोई यहाँ से हटे। देखिए आंखों में जलन है, सबने रुमाल निकाल कर मुंह पर बांध लिया है, मास्क का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं। कई सारे लोग हमें यहाँ गैस मास्क पहने भी दिखाई पड़े ताकि वो इनसे बच सकें। और अब आपको लिए चलते हैं सीधे STF के पास। ये STF है, स्पेशल टास्क फोर्स, जो आर्म्ड पुलिस है श्रीलंका की, लेकिन ये पूरी तरह से निष्क्रिय हैं। कुछ टीयर शेल कई इलाकों में फायर हुए, लेकिन ये लोग भी कुछ नहीं कर रहे हैं। प्रदर्शनकारियों पर न हाथ उठाया न डंडे चलाए, हाथों में हथियार नहीं है, कुछ टीयर शेल हैं, हाथ में लाठियां हैं, लेकिन ये अपने देश की जनता पर हाथ नहीं उठा रहे, उनको रोक नहीं रहे हैं। और इसीलिए प्रदर्शनकारी 3 लेयर का बैरिकेड तोड़कर आगे जा चुका है। ये देखिए आगे एक वाटर कैनन है और मुझे लगता है शायद वाटर कैनन भी अब वापस जा रहा है। वाटर कैनन लगभग 200 मीटर प्रदर्शनकारियों ने पीछे किया, वो पीछे लौटा और अब वो किनारे हो गया है। वाटर कैनन शायद मानिए रास्ता दे रहा है। तमाम जो ATS के लोग देखिए इन्होंने भी गैस मास्क पहन रखे हैं क्योंकि लगातार टीयर शेल फायर हो रहा है, तो खुद को बचाना जरूरी है। और वहाँ देखिए वो वाटर कैनन का पूरा जो वाटर कैनन था उसको पूरी तरह किनारे कर दिया है। यानी ये समझिए कि पुलिस और आम जो सशस्त्र बल हैं उन्होंने भी जनता को खुला रास्ता दे दिया है कि अब आप आगे बढ़िए। ये तमाम प्रदर्शनकारी आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, एकदम बिल्कुल वही तस्वीर, वही स्क्रिप्ट जो हमने 9 जुलाई को देखा था। जो भी शस्त्र बल थे वो सब सरेंडर कर चुके थे जनता के आगे, इतनी भीड़ के आगे, और ये तमाम सारे लोग लगातार आगे बढ़ते हुए कोलंबो की सड़कों पे. The crowd has totally overpowered the armed forces. There you see the special task force of the Sri Lankan police, totally armed with the gear, but none of them using force. And this is clearly a go-ahead to the protesters. They have refused to take hard action against these protesters. Now they are freely marching towards the Prime Minister's office. Of course, because multiple rounds of the tear shells were fired, the eyes are burning, throats are totally choked. And there at the side, there was a water cannon which was to prevent these protesters to move further. Now the water cannon has been kept aside by the policemen themselves, giving a go-ahead, a free go-ahead to these people to move further. So, has the forces allowed them to go further? The ATS superintendent refuses to speak. There you see the STA personnel and the army personals greeting everyone. Sir, have you allowed the protesters to go further?
Thank you very much.
Are you allowing protesters? The airborne Sri Lankan army top, the para forces of Sri Lankan army, and they are cheering up the army officials, being convinced do not mob, but they are not stopping them either. Sir, are you allowing them to go ahead further? ये सेना के जवान हैं, पैरा फोर्सेस, एयरबॉर्न फोर्सेस, श्रीलंका सेना के बड़े अधिकारी भी हैं यहाँ पर, और वो लोगों से कह रहे हैं कि मौत ना करें, हिंसा ना करें, लेकिन उन्होंने इन्हें रोकने से मना कर दिया. और इसके बाद तमाम सारे जो लोग हैं वो इन सेना की जय जयकार कर रहे हैं. तमाम जो अधिकारी है, देखिए अब यहाँ पर जो सेना है वो यहाँ पहुँच गई है हथियारों से लैस, लेकिन ये सब लाइन में खड़े हो रहे. देखिए सेना को लेकर इनको अधिकारियों के लिए ताली बजाई जा रही है, क्योंकि उन्होंने इनको रोकने से मना कर दिया. वो इन्हीं प्रदर्शनकारियों के गले मिल रहे हैं. वो कह रहे हैं कि हम हाथ नहीं उठाएंगे, और इसका सीधा सा मतलब है कि उन्होंने उन्हें आगे जाने की अनुमति दे दी है. हम एक बार फिर इनसे बात करने की कोशिश करते हैं. सर, हैव यू अलाउड देम टू गो अहेड फर्दर?
Yeah, let them go. Don't disrupt any properties here. That is the most important. Do it peacefully. Anything that we want. That's all. Okay?
The top army official saying not to disrupt the peace, not to harm the public properties, but carry out the protest.
Exactly.
Where are they heading to, sir? Where are they?
That I don't know. So we have protected the PM office. That's all. They are heading somewhere else. I don't know.
They have already crossed the Prime Minister's office.
Yes.
They have crossed the Prime Minister's office, which is right here. The army has conveyed a message: do not damage the public properties. If you're marching, march peacefully. And that's exactly where you see these army, the Sri Lankan army Jawans, heavily armed, but none of them acting against these protesters. The top army official has conveyed a message just to keep marching peacefully. They have allowed this protest to take place, and all of them are now heading towards the parliament. Their first aim was to reach Prime Minister's office. Here, army convinced them not to gather here, do not damage the property. On 9th July, when the protesters marched, there was damage to certain properties, public property. There was violent clashes. Even today, again, they're marching further. But since they have crossed the Prime Minister's office, the next is the Parliament, barely few steps from here. These protesters trying to enter the Parliament, and there you see the huge convoy of the cops. That's the entire fleet of the Colombo Club, the local police station. But again, you see, without arm, without baton, and they are watching these protesters moving. And clearly this seems to be the silent support to these protests. Remember, there have been anger even amongst these protesters against the government, against this entire administration. End of the day, they have also suffered through this economic crisis. And now the protesters have been given go-ahead. They're marching towards the parliament.
Ashutosh getting us all of those details from dry-hit streets of Colombo, where protesters, in fact, have spread out. Heavy bandobast of the army, the police in full presence there as the protesters continue to chant slogans against President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Ashutosh, if you can hear me, just give us an overview of the current situation. What are these protesters saying? And like you were suggesting that there is no crackdown on these protesters. The police and the army are exercising a great amount of restraint there.
The restraint indeed being, shown not only by the army but also the STF and also by the police. Perhaps they all are supporting this entire agitation, and this was perhaps, they ran out of their patience. Today was the day when the president was supposed to resign, but when the moment they heard the president has fled from the country, they all have started marching towards the first Prime Minister's office. Of course, they do not want to see Ranil Wickremesinghe as the interim president of Sri Lanka, and now they're marching to the parliament because that is exactly the place where this executive decision to be taken. Because the speaker will convey the message to the parliamentarians, to the MPs, and then under section the Article 40 of the Sri Lankan Constitution, the Prime Minister will take oath as interim president, and that perhaps these Sri Lankan may do not want to see Ranil Wickremesinghe as the president, and that's exactly why this anger on the streets boiling, and that was the number. The entire Gulf Air protester, remember, more than thousands, it could be the number 50, 60,000. They all just left the protest side and suddenly, spontaneously decided to march. There you see the armed ATS personnel. These are the air warriors. These are the Air Force commanders. Remember, they have been even guarding the petrol pumps. The kind of financial crisis we are seeing across Sri Lanka. First it was the STF, then the police, then the army, then even the Air Force commandos were roped in to protect the petrol pumps. Yes, that what side could be worse than this? That Air Force commandos were guarding the petrol pump, managing the administration so the people can get fuel. And of course, there was rationing. And here, that is the situation. Of course, this all to be blamed only the Rajapaksa government and the administration, which brought the entire nation on this verge of collapsing financially. And now, when a new government has to be formed, when a new president has to be formed, suddenly the existing president fled from the country, and now all it comes to Ranil Wickremesinghe. That is not acceptable to the people of Sri Lanka. This is just another point. Now, all these points that I can see, the policemen or the security persons with gas masks, with tear shells, with guns are standing, but only remain a mute spectator. You heard the senior army official say that we are not stopping them. We are only requesting them do not damage the public property. But these are the barricades were placed to stop these protesters. But that seems that they totally overpowered these policemen here, and now they are marching further. Clearly, since this entire self-motivated protest is totally leaderless, there is no leader who can lead this. And of course, since the violent clashes have stopped, now they are managing also the traffic. They are allowing the vehicles to pass through and another passage for these protesters. And this seems to be the impact that the top army officials appealed them to do not create chaos on the road. Let's not public suffer. And that seems to be how people have silently agreed to it, and they are cooperating with these agencies. The protest continues, sloganing continues, and also on the road you can see the better traffic arrangements being made by none other than but only these protesters.
Shitosh, you did say that the people are upset because the Prime Minister is going to take over as the President. This is not something that they wanted. They wanted an entire change in regime. They wanted the Rajapaksas to go, and the last thing that they wanted was for Ranil Wickremesinghe to continue, given that the Prime Minister has actually been handpicked by Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Ashutosh, I was in fact asking you if you can hear me, that we're going to go back to Ashutosh in a few moments from now, but this appears to be tear gas shells that has been fired at the protesters. But by and large, the police and the army seem to be exercising fair amount of restraint as there's anger again on the streets of Sri Lanka. These are pictures coming in from the capital city of Colombo, where the people are feeling a sense of
के आरोप है उनकी जांच और वो यहीं रहें, उन्हें उनकी कर्मों की सजा मिले। लेकिन जब वो देश छोड़ करके भाग गए तो लोगों का गुस्सा भी था। ये तमाम सारे लोग, मैं आपको बता दूं अर्पिता और नेहा, कि ये हज़ारों की संख्या में लोग गाल फेस प्रोटेस्ट पर थे, जो साइट है जहां पर प्रेसिडेंट का सेक्रेटेरिएट है, और आज 96 दिन हो गए हैं उसी जगह पर प्रदर्शन करते। उन्होंने मौसम की भी मार झेली है और आज जैसे ही पता चला कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे इंतरिम राष्ट्रपति हो सकते हैं, जो कि यहाँ का संविधान कहता है कि राष्ट्रपति की मौजूदगी में प्रधानमंत्री ही अंतरिम राष्ट्रपति होंगे जब तक कि तमाम सांसद 30 दिनों के भीतर नए राष्ट्रपति को ना चुन लें। वो तुरंत यहाँ से आगे जाने लगे और सबसे पहले इन्होंने रानिल विक्रमसिंघे का जो दफ्तर है वहाँ जाने की कोशिश की। हमने देखा किस तरह की हिंसक झड़प उन सबके बीच हुई है और अब यहाँ पर जब उन्हें आगे बढ़े तो वो प्रधानमंत्री दफ्तर की ओर, वहाँ पर सेना थी, वहाँ पर STF थी, वहाँ पर पुलिस थी, हर सब ने इनको रोकने की कोशिश की लेकिन ये रुके नहीं। और ये देखिए आगे फिर एक जगह जमावड़ा हुआ है। कई राउंड पहले हवा में गोलियां चलाई गई, टीयर शेल फायर हुए, भगदड़ सी मची, कुछ जो प्रदर्शनकारी थे वो घायल हुए, देखना बोलना सब कुछ मुश्किल हो गया था। फिर जब आगे बढ़े तो सेना ने उन्हें रोकने की कोशिश की। सेना की बस आई, उस बस में जैसे ये सवार हुए तो उन्होंने पहले बस को रोका, लेकिन जब सैनिक उतरे तो उन्होंने जो घायल प्रदर्शनकारी थे जिनकी आंखें जल रही थी उन सैनिकों ने उनकी मदद करने की कोशिश की थी। हथियार लेकर थे लेकिन उन्होंने हथियार सरेंडर कर दिए, नीचे रख दिए। यानी कुल मिलाकर के सेना ने भी इन प्रदर्शनकारियों को रोका नहीं। और जब आगे बढ़े तो अभी थोड़ी देर पहले हमारे जो सेना के बड़े अधिकारी थे उनसे बात हुई, उन्होंने कहा कि जो सार्वजनिक संपत्ति है उसको नुकसान ना पहुंचाया जाए, आप मार्च कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उन्हें ये नहीं पता कि अब कहाँ जाएंगे। और इसीलिए अब प्रधानमंत्री दफ्तर से आगे बढ़ के ये तमाम सारे लोग संसद भवन की ओर आगे बढ़े हैं, संसद भवन जाना चाहते हैं और वो नहीं चाहते कि आगे की प्रोसीडिंग कुछ ऐसी हो जिसमें रानिल विक्रमसिंघे को राष्ट्रपति नियुक्त कर दिया जाए। ये एक जो पॉइंट है, हम जहाँ पर यहाँ पहुँचे हैं और यहीं पर तमाम प्रदर्शनकारी रुक गए हैं। सब अलग अलग दिशा से आए, अलग अलग जगहों से रोकने की कोशिश की, लेकिन संख्या बल इनकी इतनी ज़्यादा थी कि कोई भी जो एजेंसी हो, चाहे वो पुलिस हो, सेना हो, यहाँ तक एयरफोर्स के कमांडो, तो कोई भी इनको ओवर पावर नहीं कर सका। प्रदर्शनकारियों की संख्या कहीं ज़्यादा थी और इसीलिए सब पीछे हट गए। और हमने देखा था कि कई सारे 9 जुलाई को जो प्रदर्शन हुआ था उसमें भी पुलिस और तमाम जो संस्थाएं थी वो इन प्रदर्शनकारियों के साथ ही खड़ी थी। और आज भी वही तस्वीर हम कोलंबो की सड़कों पर देख रहे थे। एक दूसरे की मदद, चाहे लोग हों स्थानीय, चाहे प्रदर्शनकारी हों, सब एक दूसरे की मदद कर रहे थे ताकि किसी की आंखें ना जले। और अंततः अब सब यहाँ जमावड़ा हुआ है। कई प्रदर्शनकारी अलग अलग इलाकों में हैं और भारी पूरी कोशिश की गई थी इनको रोकने के लिए, हवा में गोलियां चलाने से लेकर के टीयर शेल, लेकिन कुछ भी काम नहीं आया। प्रदर्शनकारी अंततः यहाँ पहुँच गए। महज 200 मीटर आगे संसद भवन है, ये जहाँ जाना चाहते हैं। अब आपस में ये चर्चा कर रहे हैं कि आगे किया जाए तो क्या, क्योंकि जैसे ही सेना के सर्वोच्च अधिकारी यहाँ पर आए उन्होंने कहा कि नुकसान ना करें और लगता है उसका असर दिखाई पड़ा, क्योंकि इनकी नाराज़गी यहाँ सेना के खिलाफ, पुलिस के खिलाफ नहीं है, राष्ट्रपति, पूरी सरकार उस व्यवस्था के खिलाफ है। और अब ये दिन है कि जब उनको इस्तीफा देना है, सरकार यहाँ से हटनी है। और लेकिन घटनाक्रम जो कुछ बदले 24 घंटों में, उसके बाद ये नाराज़गी का आलम हुआ कि ये प्रदर्शनकारी सड़कों पर जो पहले से ही मौजूद थे उन्होंने अपना डेरा छोड़ा और जो हाथ में था झंडा, बैनर, पोस्टर लेकर के वो सीधा मार्च करने उतर पड़े। बिल्कुल 9 जुलाई को यही हुआ था। वो सब प्रदर्शन करने के लिए जाना चाहते थे, लेकिन जैसे ही आक्रामक हो गए सब और उसके बाद उन्होंने अपनी दिशा बदल ली। जाना उन्हें गाल फेस प्रोटेस्ट साइट पर था, राष्ट्रपति दफ्तर के पास। अचानक ये प्रधानमंत्री का जो औपचारिक आवास है टेम्पल ट्री, वहाँ पहुँच गए, वहाँ पर जाकर के बैठ गए, कब्जा कर लिया। उसके बाद राष्ट्रपति आवास जैसे एक धड़ा पहले हिस्से में पहुँचा तो अगले ने राष्ट्रपति दफ्तर में कब्जा कर लिया। जैसे वहाँ की खबर मिली तो आगे जो गुट था उनको भी हिम्मत मिली, वो राष्ट्रपति के आवास में घुस गए। और उसके बाद से लेकर के जो आज की तस्वीरें हैं वो हम लगातार श्रीलंका में देख रहे हैं। बिल्कुल वैसी ही झड़प और महज 1 घंटे का ये जो पूरा स्कफल हम सड़कों पर अभी देख पा रहे थे, वो हालांकि अभी तो शांत है, लेकिन ये निर्भर करता है कि ये प्रदर्शनकारी आगे कहाँ रुकेंगे। देखिए बड़ी संख्या में तो हैं, इन्हें भी अपने भविष्य की चिंता है। एक उम्मीद है कि नई सरकार बनेगी तो वापस जो इनका देश है वो खुशियों के रास्ते पर लौटेगा, लेकिन इस बात की अनिश्चितता भी है कि नई सरकार ऐसा कौन सी जादू की छड़ी घुमा देगी जिससे ये आर्थिक संकट दूर हो जाएगा। हालांकि लगातार ये भी कहते रहे कि नई सरकार बनने पर 6 महीने से साल भर का समय वो ज़रूर देंगे ताकि बड़े फैसले लिए जा सकें, लेकिन संकट इतना बड़ा है कि सब्र उतना होगा या नहीं, ये भी देखने वाली बात होगी। फिलहाल कोलंबो में जिस इलाके पर हम ये तमाम जाए हैं, ये पेड्रिस रोड का इलाका है। तमाम सारे प्रदर्शनकारी यहाँ जमे हैं, सोच रहे हैं डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, ये चर्चा हो रही है कि आखिर आगे अब कहाँ जाएं। प्रधानमंत्री के कार्यालय तक जाना था, रानिल विक्रमसिंघे को ये नहीं देखना चाहते थे बतौर राष्ट्रपति। आखिर वहाँ ऐसा हुआ नहीं, रानिल विक्रमसिंघे भी इस दफ्तर में नहीं थे। वहाँ से अभी आगे बढ़े हैं, संसद भवन का रास्ता आगे है। जैसे ही यहाँ फैसला होगा, नारेबाजी हो रही है, उसके बाद ये तय होगा कि आखिर ये प्रदर्शनकारी अब कहाँ जाएंगे। भारी हिंसक झड़प के बाद एक जिस पेड्रिस रोड पर ये तमाम
Shashi Dhanatunge, Member of Parliament from Sri Lanka, is also now joining us. Thank you so much for your time. How do you see this moving from here on, given that there is a sense of betrayal? The president was supposed to resign. That did not happen. He's now moved to the Maldives. The people are obviously feeling a sense of betrayal there. I don't think that these protests are going to be dying down anytime soon. It only adds, Mr. Dhanatunge, to the political uncertainty in your country, doesn't it? Pictures of protests on the streets of Colombo today, with people spilling out on the streets, marching to Parliament, demanding answers. Why has the president not resigned? Instead, why is the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe taking over as the president? That's not going to do, that's not going to work, is what the people of Sri Lanka are saying. With President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who is supposed to resign today, fleeing now to the Maldives, leaving the people in a lurch, a country that has been hit by the worst economic crisis in decades together, with inflation at an all-time high. Basic necessities have been out of reach for the people of Sri Lanka for weeks and months together now, with the political leadership refusing to step down. There's anger and resentment against the Rajapaksas. Both the former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his brother, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who was to resign today. Instead, he chose to flee to the Maldives. The people are angry. The situation has not improved in Sri Lanka. The economic crisis continues to snowball. The political crisis also in the beleaguered nation. In fact, there is no resolution to what has been going on for weeks and months together. The political uncertainty also in Sri Lanka continues. These are people angry with the administration, marching on to...
वो यहाँ बात करना चाहते हैं. Why are you here? What is the next plan? Where are you heading to now? What next for you?
There is a deaf community. He wants to connect with the community.
Okay.
And against the now government.
अलग-अलग तबके के लोग हैं जो यहाँ पर आए हैं, अलग-अलग संदेशों से जो है संदेश देना चाहते हैं राष्ट्र को. अब ये कई सारे हैं जो बोल नहीं सकते. और अब वो देखिए, जो मैसेज समझ में आ रहा है वो ये कि राष्ट्रपति राजपक्षे जाएं, इस्तीफा दें. यहाँ पर एक ही नारा है, गो गोटाया गो. एक ही नारा हम यहाँ पर सुन रहे हैं. तो जब बासिल राजपक्षे के साथ जब ये घटना हुई तो जाहिर उनको डर इस बात का होगा. और सबसे बड़ी बात आपको ये भी बता दूं, जब हम यहाँ लोगों से बात कर रहे थे तो पता चला कि मालदीव्स में भी जहाँ राष्ट्रपति गए हैं वहाँ पे भी श्रीलंका के रहने वाले लोगों की संख्या बहुत ज्यादा है. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि उन्हें वहाँ प्रदर्शन या विरोध नहीं झेलना पड़ेगा. वो तस्वीरें वहाँ भी इनको देखने को मिलेगी. What is the next plan? Where are you heading to? What have you decided now?
Pictures of protesters there marching on to Parliament, seeking answers, demanding why the president has not resigned and instead chosen to flee and move to the Maldives instead. Indications that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to take over as the president. This is something that the people are extremely upset about. Senior journalist Chaturanga is now joining us. Thank you so much for your time. The people are feeling a sense of betrayal given that the president was to resign today. He did not. Instead, he chose to move to the Maldives. This isn't something that's going to die down anytime soon. The people are seeking answers. What do you make of the current situation?
As we understand. We knew that if the president wasn't going to give his resignation, people were not going to stop the struggle that they were continuing. I'm currently standing on the road to the Prime Minister's office, and here too, as you can see, thousands of people have gathered this morning, and even the protest that is happening at the Golfest site have asked for people to come in and join and ask for the Prime Minister's resignation as well. What you have to understand is constitutionally, the president's election, the new president is going to be elected on the 20th of this month. Even if the current president gives his resignation today, there is going to be a 1 week time frame where an interim president will be appointed. But constitutionally, as you can understand, if there is a sitting prime minister in the country, if Ranil Wickremesinghe does not give his resignation in today, before the president hands over his resignation, then the interim presidency will be held by Ranil Wickremesinghe. And the protesters here do not want that to happen. The demand was... Am I audible?
Yes, please continue.
Yeah, the demand of the protesters was that both President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe resigns. But as I said, if that resignation doesn't happen today, that means the interim presidency will go to Ranil Wickremesinghe, and that is not acceptable by the protesters here. And people are marching towards the Prime Minister's office. This is a bit away from the Prime Minister's private residence that was torched a few days ago. They are now marching towards the Prime Minister's office today, and they are demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister before the resignation of the President is given. Now, another small factor to remember is that the President has left the country, as there were earlier reports. The President has left the country, and he's in Maldives, as we understand, and he's trying to fly out to the United Arab Emirates, to a country in the UAE. And after that, after he reaches the final destination, is when he will basically hand in his resignation. That is the information that we have at the moment. If you recall what he has said yesterday, he has asked that his family and the members of the Rajapaksa family be safe, and that is when he's going to hand in his resignation. So when he hands in his resignation, if Ranil Wickremesinghe is still the Prime Minister of our country, he will automatically, constitutionally and legally become the interim president in the time frame between today and until a new president is elected. That is so much... uprising.
I'll just come back to you. Chaturanga, I need to know more details from you as far as the legal scenario of this is also concerned, and to what extent can the courts then really intervene? How does it really work in Sri Lanka? Welcoming Shashi Dhanatunge, Sri Lankan MP, on the show. Thank you so much for your time. What I want to know is that the people are feeling a sense of betrayal, and I don't think that these protests are going to die down anytime soon. There was a word that the president is going to resign. He instead chose in fact to move to the Maldives, which is not right. What I want to know is that what is the way forward from here on, politically speaking, and how will the crisis be resolved?
Yeah, good morning to all. Actually, let me correct, I'm not an MP. I have been a former bureaucrat. So my perspective on this matter is President Rajapaksa, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, deciding not to tender his resignation until he get into probably Dubai, and he's probably he expects the political immunity to be for him to be there until he feels that he is secure himself and also his family who is here, and whoever that is accompanying him. And so that is understood. So let's hope that he will get to Dubai safe, and then as assured that he will tender his resignation. And from there onwards, we'll have to, of course, follow the constitution. And true that the people are not happy. That's why they are demanding for the resignation of the Prime Minister. And Prime Minister, of course, has a different view, obviously, because he doesn't want to leave the country at this stage where there won't be any suitable person to hold the position until a proper handover, transition being taken place. And at the moment, the legal fraternity is looking and watching very carefully. They have given their views and they have given it in writing. And so obviously we will have to follow the constitution and whatever the protocols that comes with it. And it's not a time where both heads, that is the president who is gone out of the country with an assurance that he is tendering his resignation any moment today, and Prime Minister who is at the moment holding fort until his resignation comes in. And so thereafter, of course, there'll be a situation where he will have to hold the position of the president until such time a proper candidate is being nominated to hold that position through a proper voting system within the parliament.
Anatunge, if I understood you correctly, you said that the resignation of the president is going to be coming in. It doesn't matter if he's not there in Sri Lanka anymore, but he indeed will be resigning, and there's not going to be any sort of a U-turn, is what you've said.
Well, it's like this, because he has assured that he is going to tender his resignation, and at the very beginning, on the very first day of fleeing out of his official residence, there was a communication clearly saying that he will be resigning on the 13th, and there was another rumor that was going on, not official, that he will be tendering his resignation from Dubai. So it looks like that he has so far making his way to that particular destination to tender his resignation. So, and beyond that point, of course, the constitution has to be followed, no matter what the demand's going to be there on the streets, because I mean, you can't allow a country to be there without a proper caretaker government or a caretaker head being in place.
You know, Shashi Dhanatunge, I'm going to request you to continue to be with us because I want to understand the procedure further about what next as far as the political transition is concerned. I'm going to go straight to a senior journalist, Chaturanga, who is in fact joining us in the streets of Colombo, giving us an overview of the current situation. Chaturanga, what do you really see around you? What's going on? Tell us more.
What I'm seeing around me is that a lot of people have gathered on the road leading up to the Prime Minister's office in Colombo, and I'm just going to switch the side of the camera and I'm going to show you the number of people that are here gathered here. They are making... Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm looking at thousands of people who have gathered here, and their message is very clear, and their message is that the Prime Minister should also resign. I agree partially with what Mr. Dhanatunga mentioned earlier. The constitution of the country has to be followed, but the people for the past 1.5 months have been asking for the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. We now know that the resignation will come at some point, but when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns, if the interim presidency is going to go to the current Prime Minister as per the constitution, that is what the protesters are trying to stop here. They are asking for the resignation of the Prime Minister alongside the resignation of the President. So these two key points are happening right now in Colombo, and the people are gathering here for that reason.
You know, is there a sense that both of these resignations might just be coming in? Possibly by today, at least that of the president. Chaturanga.
Yes, from what we know right now, the resignation of the president, irrespective of whether he is in Sri Lanka or not, will come through, and there is a time frame that has been announced sort of unofficially to let the people know it. We are aware that the resignation will come around 8 p.m. today after he reaches the final destination into a country in the United Arab Emirates. So after that time frame, we will know whether the president has in fact resigned. From what I can confirm to you is that the speaker is going to be the head of the government after today, but all that depends on whether the Prime Minister in fact hands in his resignation at some point today. If not, he will be the interim president constitutionally.
Yes, go ahead. He's going to be the interim president for how much time, Chaturanga?
I'm not I couldn't hear you, sorry.
You know, you were saying that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to be the interim president. For how much time will that arrangement continue?
From what it looks like, from what I know that is happening, it's going to be for about 1 week, starting from today, if President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns this evening, until a new president is elected on the 20th of July. That's going to be about a week's time. There will be an interim presidency, but at this rate, looking at the number of people who are protesting against Ranil Wickremesinghe as merely the Prime Minister, I don't think there will be any possibility for him to continue in an interim president capacity as well. It might even be for basically a very few minutes even, if that is supposed to happen, because there are people gathered here right now, and the people who are a part of the struggle, the part of the Aragale that is happening, have called for people to come here to this location demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. So if that is the case, if the people are demanding, we have to remember that the Prime Minister did not have a mandate of the people when he became the Prime Minister. He was a nationalist MP. He came in through the nationalists. He only received 30,000 votes from Colombo. He was only made Prime Minister because of the situation, and he was only made Prime Minister by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the President at the moment. So if the President is resigning, there is no mandate for Ranil Wickremesinghe to remain as the Prime Minister of this country, and therefore he cannot be the interim President.
Okay, be with us. I'm just going to come back to you for more on that. Going across straight to my colleague Pramod Madhav, who's also now joining us from Ground Zero. Pramod, where exactly are you? First of all, give us an idea of the current situation.
Well, the situation has turned a bit volatile because we are marching from Golface all the way to the Prime Minister's office. After this today is a very, very serious day because any kind of rumor can turn into a big issue. Now there is news that spread out claiming that there were attacks on protesters near the Prime Minister's office, and people from Golface have started to march all the way towards here. You could see the long line of protesters who have completely blocked the road and they're walking towards it. When we asked them what were they marching towards, they just said that there was police attacks on the protesters, and that's why we are going over there. Apparently there seemed to be some kind of protest that has occurred here, just like I mentioned that the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe should also resign on time, and as it is not happening, protesters are getting angry, they are getting upset, and that's the reason you could see them walking towards the Prime Minister's office now.
That's right, Pramod, the people are angry because by and large the sense is that there is betrayal. He was supposed to resign today, which he did not. If you can at all, Pramod, get in a word from the protesters right behind you to ask them what next. If the president tenders his resignation today, as is being widely speculated, are they going to be satisfied? What are they expecting?
Well, the first and foremost thing they expect here is a resignation of the President and then the Prime Minister, and this is the reason. Without there is no, I could see like entire families marching towards it, and like the senior citizen, everybody walking towards the Prime Minister's office. It looks there's a different mandate over here, and there at the end of this road you see the crowd gathering. This is next to the Prime Minister's office, where people have started running from Golface to this place after getting the information. Everybody carrying their nation's flag, they're coming over, and this is only mandate for today. That's a resignation of the President and the Prime Minister. The thing turned volatile after the news that tear gas were actually used by the police against protesters at this point. So that's why a large crowd is gathering, and as we speak there are high chances of situation escalating at this location.
Pramod, like I said, if you could just try and get in a word from any of the protesters there, if possible, on what they really expect. You said they expect a resignation. Are they going to stop protesting, Pramod?
Where are you going actually?
We are going to the Prime Minister Secretary's office.
Why are you marching towards the office?
No, he is going to sign he's become to next president. We need to stop it. Yes.
And you want to stop that?
Yes.
So that's the reason you're marching towards
he's more times failed in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Prime Minister. He doesn't have a vote for Sri Lankan people.
In case he becomes a Prime Minister, what will happen?
What is?
In case he becomes a president, what will happen?
Same thing, I think.
Again protest?
Yes.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
That was one of the protesters marching towards the Prime Minister's office. and they believe that Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to sign and become the next president. And to stop that, protesters are walking towards the Prime Minister's office currently.
That's right, Pramod getting us all of those details. I'm just going to come back to you in a few moments from now, Pramod.
In fact, we have reached the Prime Minister's office over there, and you could see the crowd gathering, and over there you could see them shouting and demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe does not become the Prime Minister on the other end.
All right, right outside the Prime Minister's house, Ranil Wickremesinghe is facing these protesters. These are pictures from outside Ranil Wickremesinghe's house. Give us an idea, Pramod, about the kind of security presence there, the army deployment in this particular area, given that things could go out of hand.
The barricades that were placed here were already removed by the protesters, and now they have crossed these barricades as well, and they are going towards the Prime Minister's office. They believe that this also, based on the news, that he will become the next Prime Minister, President, and that's the reason they are protesting, and they're also gathering the people as they walk towards the Prime Minister's office, claiming that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made the next president. Police are here, as you could see, on the other end, but none wanted to intervene. They are carrying their gas masks. There are the high chances of tear gas use. Beginning the information that already tear gas used.
Okay. Just try to fix that line with Pramod also is getting us all of those details. From right outside the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's house, one of the protesters there, Abhay Singh, is also now joining us. Abhay, give us an idea about what do the people of Sri Lanka want. I understand that you're waiting for the president to resign, and that is expected to happen by today. But what next from here?
Yeah, so I'm at the Goalface protest zone. So the reason why people are panicked and protesting is today is the date that the president gave the day as he will resign. According to our constitution, after president resigns, automatically the prime minister becomes the president. That is the law. So what our demand was, both of these people, Ranil Wickremesinghe and Gotabaya, has to resign at once. Or either Ranil Wickremesinghe should resign before Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Then the constitution allows the acting president to be the speaker of the house. So that is what we really want. We don't want Ranil Wickremesinghe to become the acting president after Gotabaya Rajapaksa leaves office. So today at Goalface protest zone, the protesters have given a deadline, that is 13 hours, that is 1 p.m. Both these people has to resign, or if not, we are calling in whole of Sri Lanka to occupy Colombo. So that's the plan. If both these people does not resign today, Colombo will be shut down, and the whole country will be shut down from tomorrow.
You know, Abhay Singh, I also want to ask you, are these protests organized? Are there WhatsApp groups to ask protesters to gather? Just give us an idea about what the sentiment really is on the ground. Are these spontaneous protests?
So these are sentiments that's been built over a period of time. So we have an organized team at the Goalface who stood here for about 90 odd days, and there is agreements reached among the protesters here as well as the political parties. So what's happening now is a collective sentiment of the opposition, and the protesters are in line. That is a very good sign for Sri Lanka, because the opposition has agreed that this Friday the speaker will speak to the house and declare the presidency is moved out, and then new nominations for presidentialship will be called upon on next Tuesday, and by Wednesday the House is able to appoint a new president, then a new cabinet, which is a multi-party cabinet that is in agreement with the protest organizers in the country. So from a protester's perspective and the wide different type of protest groups, we all are in agreement for this process, and that process is very clear and legal. It is very legal. So what we need as steps, the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to give his resignation today before 1 o'clock, Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign, Speaker to call on the Parliament on Friday, and declare that we don't have a president and invite the parliament to appoint a president, parliament to nominate few people or the people that a person that parliament believes who can be the president on Tuesday. One or two people that might be, that's okay. Again on Wednesday, there will be an election, parliamentary election to decide who's the president. So the protesters, multiple protest groups are here, diverse crowd. Everybody is in agreement. At the same time, as you said, now it's very spontaneous. Whole public in the country is in agreement with this process, and particularly today, they are in agreement that today is the day both these people should leave. And actually, you need to understand this is not about these two people. People are rejecting the system. So people want this 74-year corrupt political culture to end, and Ranil Wickremesinghe is a 48 years in this politics. So therefore, there's no chance for him to rule the country after Gotabaya Rajapaksa retired.
You know, Abhay Singh, I want to ask you, a lot of people that we in India have spoken to give us an idea that there is tremendous anger against Rajapaksas, the manner in which they've occupied government, key positions in the cabinet, and that the people are absolutely done with the family essentially. Is that the sense among the protesters?
Yes, the protest started in a similar fashion, but I think our education, our literacy is very high in this country, and now people have understood it's not the violence we would take or, take law into our hand. There is a process. So therefore, people are now waiting for the new government to take action against the Rajapaksas and start interrogating into assets. And also, we have been, as protesters and activists, been able to educate Sri Lankans that there is enough international laws that can bring down Rajapaksas, stolen assets, stolen money, both Rajapaksas and the henchmen around them, ruin this country with, money that's been misused. So we have to understand, and we are educating everyone. We, as public, will not take the law into hand. We will not go behind their houses to take them out.
Okay.
We will stick for democracy. We will stick for democracy and allow a democratic legal process to take down the Rajapaksa.
Okay. Abhay, be with us. We'll just come back to you for more on that. I'm going to go straight to my colleague Pramod Madhav, who is getting us a quick update from right outside Ranil Wickremesinghe's house. Pramod, what more can you tell us?
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead, Pramod. Pramod, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can, Pramod. Go ahead.
Well, I am standing outside the Prime Minister's office currently, and here tear gas has also already been used, and now the public are walking. They are jumping over the compound wall, as you could see on the frame over there. They have stormed into the Prime Minister's office in a move to make sure that Ranil Wickremesinghe does not become the Prime Minister. This is the moment the people of Sri Lanka are entering the Prime Minister's office, and they are actually storming, as you can see, with great applause. With great applause, people are entering the Prime Minister's office currently, and there are people from Golface who have come over here. Their only demand is that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the Prime Minister. And here you see they have climbed over the compound walls. Earlier there was rumors that actually tear gases were thrown. Now you could see the police on top of that building. They're also trying to throw away the protesters. They are being pushed very quickly as between the protesters and the police at this point over there. And now water bottles are being thrown at the protesters at this point.
Catch your breath, Pramod. We'll just come back to you in a few moments from now. We're just showing these visuals of these protesters. Exclusive pictures. This is the residence of the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe. Remember, the man who has been handpicked by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The demand is that he must be resigning by 1 p.m. today. We heard from the protesters, they're saying that these resignations must come in because there is a fear that as per the constitution, when Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns, Ranil Wickremesinghe might just take over as the president. This is not something that the protesters want. Pramod is back with us. Pramod, if you can, just give us an idea about the current situation? We see pictures of chaos and mayhem from right here.
That's the reason people are using their crowds. And in fact, on the other end, you can see water bottles are thrown, and a large crowd has actually gone on top of the over there. They are breaking the lights on this thing, and they're pulling other people. These are Sri Lankans who are entering the Prime Minister's residence. And even on this side, where the staircase, people are there. Police have, the military have gone into their particular safe place, and they're over there. For now, no shooting, no nothing's happening. But this entire crowd is surrounded by Sri Lankans who do not want Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister. In fact, as you see over there, look at that color. They are on top of the building and they're raising the flag, claiming Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the next president.
Pramod, I'm coming back to you for more on that. Meanwhile, I'm going to go across straight to my colleague Chaturanga, who's getting us more details about the situation. From where he is, what's the update? Chaturanga, if you could tell us more about what you see around you.
Yes, there are, as I showed you earlier, there are people gathered here, and the crowds don't seem to be reducing at the moment. There'll be a lot of people coming here. And as Abhay Singh mentioned, they are asking for the resignation of the President and the Prime Minister both by 1 p.m. this afternoon. That's at the 13th of the 13th. That is what they are asking. And you can see here that the entire road towards the Prime Minister's office in Colombo has been barricaded off. You can see water cannons and security parked here on standby for any violence that could erupt. So the situation is that the people are chanting, asking for the President and the Prime Minister both to hand in their resignations by 1 p.m. today.
Demand is that the resignations must be handed over by 1 p.m. today. There is no holding back these protesters. And Pramod, there is thankfully no brutal crackdown on them. I'm going to go, in fact, once again back to my colleague Chaturanga. Chaturanga, all throughout. Okay, now we see tear gas shells on our screens right now from right outside the Prime Minister's residence where protesters have gathered. Chaturanga, once again, tear gas shells are being used by the authorities there to disperse the crowds. But there is no holding back these protesters, isn't it?
There is definitely no holding back these protesters. Their demands are very clear. They have always been asking for very clear demands. They haven't been wavering in what they have wanted. They have been respecting the democratic right of people to protest. And as you say, these people are the Prime Minister in power does not have the mandate to hold an interim presidency. So therefore, the people are asking for the immediate resignation, and before 1 p.m. is the deadline. So the protesters are very clear on what they are asking. They have been so, and they are continuing to be very clear on what they are requesting and demanding.
Visuals of these protesters right outside Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's house, where tear gas shells are being used to disperse the crowds, but they are very clear about what they want. They are wanting both the Prime Minister and the President to resign by 1 o'clock. Today is what one of the protesters told India Today. They want the Parliament to be convened by Friday and then parliamentary elections to then take things forward from here on. First, there has to be a resolution of the political crisis, and then things will fall back in place is what the sentiment really is. If the Prime Minister and the President do not resign by afternoon today, by 1 o'clock today, one of the protesters said that there is going to be a call to ask the entire country to in fact descend onto the capital city of Colombo and take things over from here on. The army is exercising control, but tear gas shells are being used to in fact disperse the crowds right then. Chaturanga, as far as the political crisis is concerned, if at all we see the resignations come through today and earliest by tonight, then things could move, isn't it, as far as the resolution of the political crisis is concerned?
Definitely. One thing that I should mention is this is where the people had gathered earlier, and the police just opened up the barricades and allowed the people to march towards the Prime Minister's office. And the people have now gone through the barricade and they're walking towards the Prime Minister's office. I'm going to join with them and walk with the people and see where they're headed. But as you said, yes, there will be some sort of resolution to this problem as we go forward if there are those clear resignations coming through. There is a deadline that has been set by the people that they should be resigning by 1 p.m. today. And from the looks of it, from what I know and what I can share with us as the media, is that the resignation will come only in the evening, in the later hours of the evening today, only from the president, as far as we are aware. So we do not know what the Prime Minister will be doing. We do not know what the resignation decision of the Prime Minister is going to be. And from what it looks like, the people will not go down without, actually getting that resignation. So we have to wait and see until the end of the day as to how things will unfold.
We're getting all details from Colombo, where protesters have marched to the Prime Minister's house. Ranil Wickremesinghe. What next? The protesters say the President and the Prime Minister must resign and that parliamentary elections should be announced so that there is a democratically elected government. The family is what they are fed up of, is what one of the protesters told us. Chaturanga also explained the process to us if things move in the right direction. Elections will be called and these will be presidential elections or what? How does this really work essentially?
Yeah, so what will initially happen is it will most likely be the appointment of the president and with the majority in parliament, a new prime minister will be appointed, an all-party government will be appointed, and they will run for a short time frame. This new government will run for a short time frame, and there will be a general election that will be called, and following that there will be a presidential election.
Pictures from outside the Prime Minister's house. Ranil Wickremesinghe, where protesters have gathered and chaos and mayhem is witnessed as always on the streets of Colombo. What we've been seeing since Saturday demands that the President resign and the Prime Minister resign. They don't want Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe to take over as the President. Remember, Sri Lanka has been witnessing the worst kind of economic crisis that has snowballed into a political one with a lot of anger against the current political dispensation. What does this really mean as far as the political stability of Sri Lanka is concerned, and how far will some amount of stability on the political front help the country restore the economic situation, which has been in doldrums for weeks and months together, with angry Sri Lankans having to brace the worst kind of inflation. Basic necessities which have been out of reach of the people of Sri Lanka for weeks and months together. Tear gas shells are being used at the protesters. I'm going to try and go across once again to my colleague, to Pramod Madhav, for more details on that. Also, if Shashi Dhanatunge is with us, former bureaucrat, I'll try and ask a question to him as well, if I could get an update on that front too.
We're currently outside the Prime Minister's office, and currently what is happening here is that has been herself and for public which entered the
Okay, these are visuals in fact from Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's house.
Emergency outside the Prime Minister's office, and currently what is happening here is that has been herself and for public next which entered the police are running away. They are the crowd, public police basically running away from the Prime Minister's residence. Earlier they came over here demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made the actor and next president over here. You could see as we speak, the public police is using tear gas and police are also going over there. Now these protesters, everybody is running away earlier because none of them chaos over there. The entire place has gone chaos. Police unable to control the crowd. But currently outside the Prime Minister's office, and as we speak, these were the protesters public who were at Calface earlier, and now they are trying to move away from this place, who are dispersing and running away from the Prime Minister's residence. Earlier they came over here demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be We're currently outside the Prime Minister's office, and currently what is happening here is that as for public which entered the police are running away. They are the the crowds who are dispersing and running away from the Prime Minister's residence. Earlier they came over here demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made the actual next president. Over here, you could see as we speak, this is full public. Police is using tear gas and police are also going over there. And currently, now this place, everybody is running away because of the chaos over there. Entire place is turned chaos. Police unable to control the crowd. They have used tear gas at this point. And as we speak, these were the protesters who were at South West earlier. And now they're trying to move away from this place. Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made the actual next president over here.
We are breaking at this state of emergency has been declared in Sri Lanka, as what the Prime Minister's office has said after the president fled to the Maldives, is what we are learning. Sri Lanka continues to be crippled by an economic crisis, political instability in the country. In fact, that has been seeing the worst kind of economic crisis for weeks and months together. Pictures, in fact, on your screen are from Colombo, the capital city of Sri Lanka, where protesters have been tear-gassed right outside the house of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, where they tried to try to get inside the house of Ranil Wickremesinghe. They want that he too should be resigning and that he must not take over as the president, because that essentially is the procedure. Sri Lanka has been crippled by the worst kind of economic crisis and political instability continues. Protesters demand that both the Prime Minister and the President resign by 1 o'clock today, is what they say. They do not want Ranil Wickremesinghe to take over as the President. That is something that they are absolutely against, given that the Prime Minister has actually been handpicked by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who's fled to the Maldives. I'm going to go straight to Ashutosh Mishra for the very latest on that. Ashutosh, what's really going on? Where exactly are you right now? Okay, I'm going to try and connect with Ashutosh. Understandably, there's a lot of chaos and mayhem right now on the streets of Sri Lanka, on the streets of Colombo, where tear gas shells have been used against the protesters. Our reporters are getting all the details from ground zero, where protesters have marched to the Prime Minister's house, trying to in fact break through the barricading there right outside the house of the Prime Minister and get inside the residence of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. The army also trying to exercise a great amount of restraint, given the kind of disgruntlement that is right for us to see. Remember, these are people who've seen the worst kind of economic crisis. They're battling inflation. Basic necessities are out of reach for the ordinary Sri Lankan. The protesters have said that they're going to call upon the entire country to descend on Colombo just if the Prime Minister and the President do not resign by 1 p.m. today, is what one of the protesters told us a while ago. We'll try and play out that interview also for our viewers in a bit from now, but we're staying live with these pictures for the moment of protesters trying to break into the house of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Meanwhile, a state of emergency has been declared in Sri Lanka. Nazik is getting us more details on that story as well. Nazik, where are you and what do you really see around you right now?
Right now I am in the goal-face protest side, and the people are peacefully protesting here, stating that both the President and Prime Minister should resign. That is the actual people's demand. But if any politician like is already electorally rejected, the current Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe can't stay in the office if President Gotabaya resigns.
Peaceful protests around you. The protesters have been saying that they can't let Ranil Wickremesinghe take over as the president. Nazik? Putting out these ground reports that my colleagues have been sending us from riot hit Colombo.
People are entering the Prime Minister's office currently, and there are people from Golface who had come over here. Their only demand is that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the Prime Minister. And here you see they have climbed over the compound walls. Earlier there was rumors that actually tear gases were thrown. Now you could see the police on top of that building. They're also trying to throw away the protesters. They are being pushed. There is a clash between the protesters and the police at this point over there, and now water bottles are being thrown at the protesters at this point. With great applause, people are entering.
Straight across to Chaturanga, who is in fact getting us more details on that story as well. What is the update? What is that you see around you?
The Prime Minister, and here you see they have climbed over the compound walls. Earlier there was rumors.
Fired. Shots being fired.
They're also trying to throw away.
और ये हजारों की संख्या में प्रदर्शनकारी पीछे में कैमरामैन पहली तो कोई हार गई आगे फिर से देखिए ये श्रीलंकन सेना है जो अब आगे बढ़ रही है और टीयर शेल लगातार टीयर शेल दागे जा रहे हैं ये भी देखना मुश्किल है कि
Well, absolute mayhem on the streets of Colombo. It's rioted with protesters marching towards the house of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. He still has presidential, in fact, ambitions to become the president, and that exactly is what the people of Sri Lanka do not want. That is what the protesters have said, that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe must resign by 1 o'clock today. State of emergency has been declared in Sri Lanka, is what the Prime Minister's office has also confirmed after the President left for the Maldives. Shashi Danatunge, former bureaucrat, continues to be with us. Thank you so much for holding on patiently at that. I want to ask you, if at all the protesters have their way, and if at all the resignations of both the Prime Minister and the President come in today, what is going to be the procedure from here on? What is the Parliament going to deliberate on? And what are they going to eventually decide? What is the procedure? Are there going to be elections?
Yeah, automatically the power will be transferred to the Speaker, and the Speaker of the House will be the caretaker President. And already, as all parties have agreed, by this coming Friday, the Speaker will have to inform the Parliament formally that the President is no more, and there has to be a new President to be appointed along with the Prime Minister in the event that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe also tenders his resignation today. And then, of course, the Parliament will have to come out with the names whom they think the most suitable candidates would be for those positions, and they will have to keep voting for those positions through a secret ballot. So that's the procedure. And I think the situation what has created today, which being a public holiday, as I see, it's so unfortunate because it appears that there have been a serious communication breakdown, and because the Prime Minister, I know, I think a couple of days ago, after his house was burned down by the protesters or some other groups, he made a statement saying that he's ready to tender his resignation, and he has never said that he will not tender his resignation. And but of course there has to be a procedure that has to be followed, and he's happy to follow that procedure and do the transition. So even today, up to this point, why either he's or the government is silent about it, knowing very well that there are groups demanding for his resignation, and also there are groups on the streets trying to march towards his office and break through, and no communication when at a time where the technology is available, whether you can tweet it, whether you can even go to one of the television stations or request the television stations to send their teams and get a statement out and communicate and send the messages out. I mean, there is no reason for anybody to stay quiet and allow the situation to be this much difficult as well as hard to control.
Okay.
And even now, if you look at, if both President and Prime Minister tenders their resignation, say
Shashi Ranatungi, please hold on. I have an update from my colleague Chaturanga, who's also getting us the ground report from Colombo. Chaturanga, what more can you tell us? What is it that you really see around you?
There are Air Force helicopters flying around the Prime Minister's office in Colombo. Heavy security has been placed here in front of the Prime Minister's office. Army Special Forces have been called and they are standing in a fence to stop the people who are gathered outside. It's almost as if it was during the time when there was a war happening in the country. We have not seen military helicopters flying over Colombo unless it was for some emergency purpose or for the Independence Day parade. But now we have Air Force helicopter circling the area where the Prime Minister's office is located. There are a lot of people here. There are police officers here. There are military personnel, Air Force, Special Task Force. All of these people are gathered here. I'm just trying to switch the camera and show you some of the visuals that is happening here. Police Special Task Force have gathered here. The army and I don't know whether you are able to see there is an Air Force helicopter circling this location as well.
Okay, army commandos are in the chopper and hovering over the Prime Minister's house. Also, Chaturanga, it is believed that the Prime Minister is inside his official residence right now.
I don't know whether he is in fact inside, but from this security that is being provided, and in fact with the circling of an Air Force helicopter, we can sort of make an estimate that he is in fact inside this location, because this is not his official residence, but the official office of the Prime Minister as well. So there is a high chance that he is inside.
But a situation, there is in fact a fear that the people might be taking over like they did, isn't it, Chaturanga? As far as the presidential palace is concerned, in Colombo, the protesters are unrelenting here.
Yeah, this scenes are a bit disturbing, to be honest, because when there was the presidential, the issue surrounding the presidential palace, there was a systematic manner in which the military engaged with the military and the police engaged with the protesters. There were, of course, tear gas being fired and all of that happening. But right now, this is a bit scary because in one area, we see people have climbed on the wall.
Okay, we'll try and fix the audio with Chaturanga in a few moments from now. He's getting us the ground reports. We have these details with us right now as far as today is concerned. Demand from the protesters that the Prime Minister and the President both resign by 1 o'clock today. One of the protesters told us that if that does not happen, that people from all over Sri Lanka will be descending onto Colombo. Army commandos right now are hovering over the Prime Minister's house, which of course is his official residence. The Prime Minister is believed to be right inside, so there is a huge security threat as well with protesters. In fact, trying to take over the Prime Minister's official residence and house.
अब यहाँ देखना कुछ ऊपर हेलीकॉप्टर जो है लगातार मंडरा रहा है सेना का और अब आंसू गैस के गोले छोड़ दिए यहाँ पर प्रधानमंत्री के दफ्तर पर बहुत भारी भीड़ पहुँच गई थी और वो अंदर जाने की कोशिश थे सेना के हाथ में नहीं था हालात को काबू करना और देखिए अचानक से एक साथ हेलीकॉप्टर आया हमारे ठीक ऊपर, ये लगातार ऊपर से मंडरा रहा है। कई सारे लोग घायल हो गए हैं। मेरे कैमरामैन वहीं गाड़ी पर हैं। उनको भी वहाँ देख पाना कुछ भी मुश्किल होगा। सज्जा वहाँ से उतर के आगे भागिए। देखिए यहाँ कई सारे लोग घायल हो गए हैं, लोग एक दूसरे की मदद कर रहे हैं पानी डाल के आँख पे, और कुछ भी देख पाना मुश्किल है। पानी 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 डाल दे, डाल बस है। यहाँ पर कुछ भी देख पाना बहुत मुश्किल है इस समय। सेना के जो स्पेशल कमांडो का दस्ता है वो इस समय ऊपर मंडरा रहा है। ये पता चला कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे अपने इसी दफ्तर में मौजूद है। प्रदर्शनकारी दीवार पर चढ़ रहे थे और जैसे दीवार पर चढ़ने लगे, अंदर जाने लगे, हालात बेकाबू होने लगे, उन्होंने तुरंत टीयर गैस के गोले चलाए। कई सारे लोग यहाँ घायल हुए हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा भीड़ थी। ये भीड़ जो है कुछ सैकड़ों में नहीं बल्कि हज़ारों में थी, और वो जैसे लोग भागने की कोशिश करने लगे, अंदर जाने की कोशिश करने लगे, सेना ने उन्हें रोका, दीवार खाली कराने की कोशिश की। हालांकि लाठी चार्ज नहीं किया इस बार। अभी उन्होंने हवा में गोली नहीं चले। देखिए
इंडिया, dear India, please don't involve our country. You always involve our country in last.
Big story we are breaking at this hour. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is now the acting president of Sri Lanka. President Gotabaya has fled. The Prime Minister has taken over as president. The acting president declares a state of emergency. This exactly is what the protesters did not want. They did not want Ranil Wickremesinghe, a man who has been handpicked by Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister to take over as the acting president. But this was a procedure, and the procedure has been followed here. The protesters have been saying that all hell is going to be breaking loose if this happens, and this exactly is what has happened. We spoke to the protesters who said we do not want the Prime Minister to be declared as the acting president of Sri Lanka, but that exactly is the development that we're reporting on right now. The acting president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has declared a state of emergency in Sri Lanka. Protesters had been saying that they do not want the Prime Minister to take over as the president, but Ranil Wickremesinghe is now the acting president of Sri Lanka. President Gotabaya fled earlier to the Maldives, and the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, a man who has been earlier handpicked by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has taken over as the president of Sri Lanka. The acting president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has declared a state of emergency in Sri Lanka. It was evident that Ranil had presidential ambitions, with him in fact clinging to power. Ranil Wickremesinghe continues in fact to be in power and has taken charge as the acting president of Sri Lanka. The political flux, however, continues. Let's go straight to Ashutosh for more details on that.
अनुच्छेद 40 के तहत ये प्रावधान है, ये संवैधानिक प्रावधान है कि जैसे ही राष्ट्रपति इस्तीफा देते हैं या वो मौजूद नहीं हैं, उनकी अनुपस्थिति में जो प्रधानमंत्री हैं वही कार्यवाहक राष्ट्रपति होते हैं। लेकिन ये कार्यवाहक राष्ट्रपति के पास जो अधिकार हैं वो बहुत सीमित होते हैं। ऐसे में उन्हें संसद की अनुमति लेनी पड़ेगी हर तरह के फैसले के लिए, तब तक जब तक कि 30 दिनों के भीतर नए राष्ट्रपति का चुनाव नहीं हो जाता। ये लोग नहीं चाहते कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे राष्ट्रपति बने और वो जो है पूरा जो टेन्योर है वो एक्सीड करने अपने अधिकारों का इस्तेमाल करते हुए वही परमानेंट राष्ट्रपति को दे देते। इस तरह से कुछ नजर रखी जा रही है रानिल विक्रमसिंघे के दफ्तर पर, ताकि उनको कोई नुकसान ना हो और कोशिश की जा रही है कि उन्हें यहाँ से निकाला जाए। लेकिन अब जब चूंकि कार्यवाहक राष्ट्रपति बने हैं, पहला फैसला प्रधानमंत्री का, अब उनके वो प्रधानमंत्री भी हैं और राष्ट्रपति भी हैं, तो पहला फैसला जो उनके दफ्तर से आया है आदेश वो ये कि पश्चिमी जो प्रोविंस है वहां पर कर्फ्यू लगा दिया जाए। तो सबसे पहले उन्होंने कर्फ्यू के आदेश दिए हैं, साथ ही आपातकाल लगा दिया गया है। अब 15 तारीख को सत्र बुलाया गया है और 19 तारीख को तमाम जो पार्टियां हैं, चाहे वो सत्ताधारी एसएलपी हो, एसजेपी अलायंस हो, विपक्ष में, वो लोग अपने उम्मीदवारों का नामांकन करेंगे। लेकिन इस बीच अगर सत्ता और विपक्ष में बातचीत होती है तो शायद स्पीकर के नाम पर मुहर लगे और उन्हीं को उम्मीदवार बनाया जाए। लेकिन ये एक राजनीतिक प्रक्रिया है, लेकिन यहाँ जमीन पर राजनीतिक संकट है। अब प्रक्रियाओं का इंतजार जनता नहीं करना चाहती, क्योंकि वहाँ ये हो रहा है जो वो नहीं चाहते थे। एक तो राष्ट्रपति भाग गए, दूसरा रणनील विक्रमसिंघे के नाराजगी के बावजूद भी उनको जो है राष्ट्रपति बना दिया गया, जबकि ये चाहते थे कि संवैधानिक प्रक्रिया के तहत प्रधानमंत्री अगर पद न लें तो स्पीकर को भी जो है इंटरिम प्रेसिडेंट बनाया जा सकता है, इसके प्रावधान हैं। लेकिन बावजूद उसके ऐसा नहीं हुआ, जिसके चलते ये नाराजगी है। और एक बार ये देखिए, यहाँ इतने सारे लोग हैं, ये तमाम पानी लेकर के आ रहे हैं, तमाम जो प्रदर्शनकारी हैं वो पानी लेकर के आ रहे हैं, क्योंकि यहाँ लोगों की आंखें जल रही हैं, गले सूख रहे हैं और लगातार जो टीयर शेल फायर। देखिए एक बार फिर जो प्रदर्शनकारी है वो चढ़ने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। ये रणनील विक्रमसिंघे का दफ्तर है जहां वो मौजूद हैं और ये प्रदर्शनकारी उस पार जाना चाहते हैं। सेना ने बल प्रयोग नहीं किया, लेकिन आंसू गैस के गोले छोड़कर बस उन्हें हटाने की कोशिश की। देखिए फिर एक बार दीवारों पर वो चढ़ रहे हैं, यानी ये लोग और फिर एक बार टीयर शेल, आंसू गैस के गोले, फिर एक बार आंसू गैस के गोले डाले गए हैं। देखिए रह रह कर यहाँ पर भगदड़ हो रही है। देखिए आंसू गैस के गोले अंदर से छोड़े गए और अब प्रदर्शनकारी बाहर से पानी की बोतलें अंदर फेंक रहे हैं। और अब ये देखिए कहीं पर इसको इस तरह की झड़प की स्थिति कहाँ, ये लोकतंत्र में जो तस्वीरें होती हैं सवाल खड़े करती हैं। लेकिन यहाँ हमने देखा कि रेस्ट्रेन किया है सेना ने, अपनी ओर से कोशिश की है कि गोली न चलाएं, लाठीचार्ज न किया जाए, बल प्रयोग, लेकिन आंसू गैस के गोले से भीड़ को तितर बितर किया जाए ताकि प्रधानमंत्री के दफ्तर में लोग घुसने ना पाए, कम से कम वहां पर हिंसा ना हो। इस हिंसा को बचाने की पूरी कोशिश प्रदर्शनकारियों की ओर से भी हो रही है, वरना इनकी संख्या इतनी ज्यादा है, ये चाहे तो सेना पर भारी हो सकते हैं और उनकी भीड़ उन पर हावी होती दिखाई पड़ती है। लेकिन हाथापाई की नौबत नहीं आई, वो उनका सम्मान भी कर रहे हैं, उनके साथ बातचीत कर रहे हैं, चर्चा कर रहे हैं। और ये जो सैनिक है, चाहे वो स्पेशल कमांडोज हों या फिर एयरफोर्स के कमांडोज, हर तबके को यहाँ पर लगाया गया है। उनकी कोशिश है कि किसी भी हाल में प्रदर्शनकारी प्रधानमंत्री के कार्यालय में न घुसने पाएं, क्योंकि इकलौता वही संवैधानिक दफ्तर आज की तारीख में श्रीलंका में कार्यरत है, क्योंकि राष्ट्रपति दफ्तर पर, उनके आवास पर, प्रधानमंत्री आवास पर प्रदर्शनकारियों का कब्जा है। और ये देखिए हम यहाँ देख रहे हैं कि भीड़ तितर बितर तो हो रही है, लेकिन वहां से भीड़ बढ़ती जा रही है। बैरिकेड, जितनी गाड़ियां भर भर के लोग पानी लेकर के आ रहे हैं, क्योंकि यहाँ सबके देखिए कई सारी महिलाएं हैं, लड़कियां हैं जो घायल हुई हैं, आंखों में आंसू गैस के गोले लगने की वजह से आंखें जल रही हैं, पूरा बदन दरअसल जल रहा है इसकी वजह से। ये सारे लोग खुद को बचाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, कपड़े गीले करके कुछ इस तरह से आंखों का इलाज किया जा रहा है। ये देखिए तमाम सारे लोग, इसमें ही पानी भर लिया गया, ये सड़क पर डिवाइडर का काम करता है। अब दरअसल ये पानी भरा गया ताकि आप कम से कम देखा जा सके, कपड़े भिगा करके लोग इलाज कर रहे हैं, वरना अगर देखना मुश्किल हो जाएगा यहाँ पर कि आसपास हो।
Office after the news that he was president, and because of that protesters who are gathered at Golface have come over here and they are protesting near the president's prime minister's office. In fact, they are marching towards the prime minister's office. This is the third time they are doing so. The first time when they did, tear gas was shot by the police and they had to return back. The second time we accompanied the protesters who also once again went over there, and tear gas was used and they had to come back again. The second time they tried to storm into the building by climbing into the wall, but the police and the security forces over there pushed them back. Third time protesters are going towards the Prime Minister's office and they are only said, make sure that Rhea Chakraborty does not become the next president. This is what they want, because they claim not just Gotabaya Rajapaksa, but also Rhea Chakraborty should not become the next president. And that's the reason protests are wave after wave. They are going towards the Prime Minister's office, even though the police over there are using tear gas. Extremely difficult to breathe and see. Protesters are not budging. They are going back once again to the place, demanding that the Ranil Wickremesinghe does not become the Prime Minister. This situation has once again turned volatile on D-Day, the same day when Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe, Gotabaya Rajapaksa was supposed to resign, and Ranil Wickremesinghe already said that he will resign. From Colombo, Pramod Madhav for India Today. Situation has become extremely volatile.
Chaturanga is also with us for the very latest. The Prime Minister finally has taken over as the acting president, and I think things are only going to escalate, given that that exactly is what the protesters did not want.
Yeah, correct. And as the first action of the Prime Minister as the acting president, he has initiated almost military situation here. People are, as you can see, tear gas is being fired behind me, and the people are demanding still in front of his residence. The people don't seem to be moving away as well. A short while ago, you saw a military helicopter, Air Force helicopter hovering around this area, a gun-mounted helicopter hovering around our heads here. So as the first action of the Prime Minister, what he has done as the acting president is basically try to instill fear in the people who have gathered here asking for his resignation, is what it looks like.
Well, yes, absolutely, but that is not forthcoming. So what does this really do as far as the political instability is concerned? It only adds to it, Chaturanga, doesn't it?
This situation is not going to, I don't think from what it looks like, the situation is going to de-escalate anytime soon. There are lots of people and what we have seen from the times when tear gas is being fired into the protesters in previous occasions is when the tear gas is being fired, and since these people are, the protesters are so connected, they're the youth of this country, they call for other people to come here, and the numbers are only going to increase behind me, and right now let me prove my point to you. As you can see from this side of the road, that is the other end of the road, there are people walking towards the Prime Minister's office, which is on this side where the tear gas is being fired. And that is only going to strengthen whatever protests that these people are carrying out. And the Air Force helicopter that we saw a while ago has also...
Be with us, Chaturanga. I'm going to come back to you in a few moments. Pramod has some details as well. Pramod, what's the update?
Plus, yeah, we are outside the Prime Minister's office, in front of the Prime Minister's office, and issue is that the internet has been completely down over there, so we have to move a little farther away. But on the right side of the road, you could see the crowd that is still moving in. It's turning into a very volatile situation because the crowds are trying to move in wave after wave, and the police are using tear gas. And just moments ago, an army helicopter was also...
Pramod is right at the house of the Prime Minister, where protesters have again carried out the official residence of Prime Minister and now acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Protests have intensified. Now that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken over as the acting President, Chaturanga continues to be with us for more on that. Chaturanga, you were in fact telling us about the protesters there.
Yeah. As I was trying to explain to you, Sneha, the protest is only going to get strong by actions of this nature. Now, minutes ago, I told you that when tear gas is being fired on that direction where I'm pointing that way, people are going to come here. I'm going to just turn around and show you the other side of the road. Can you see behind me the number of people who are in fact walking towards the Prime Minister's Prime Minister's office, now the acting president, because this movement is only going to get stronger if the government decides to quell it. And I don't think just because they fly a military helicopter over the heads of these protesters who have been attacked, assaulted, tear gas, taken to court, is going to stop anything that is happening here in Sri Lanka.
You know, Chaturanga, it won't. It's evident that these protesters are unrelenting. But what I want to ask you is that if you could try and get a word from some of the protesters there, asking them. Okay, Chaturanga, I'm going to come back to you. Pramod is back with us with the very latest. Yes, Pramod?
All red. Is it because of the red?
Pramod, if you can hear me, what's going on? If you could just tell us, what do you really see around you right now?
Well, the protesters are receding. The problem here is that, like, as one set of protesters come back, the other set moves in. That's what you could see on the end of the road. We could not go over there because there is no signal at this point. They're almost a perimeter and around the Prime Minister's office. We are not getting internet at all, so we have to move back. What the police have done is that they are using non-lethal force for now. At least as far as I can count, twice tear gas was used, and the second round we were caught also on the twice tear gas, and so we had to come back actually. Then a army helicopter was used at this point. It was making low flying pass over there, and still the protesters were not scared. They are determined, and they claim that the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the president. They are very much strong about it, and that's the reason they are gathering. And now certain protesters on the vehicles, they just requested them to come back to Golf Race to continue the protest over there. But as we were standing over over there, and we saw tear gas being deployed. 2 army helicopters left the spot. One was making circles, the other one left the area itself. So we're not sure if the Prime Minister is inside the office or anyone else was removed from the Prime Minister's office using army helicopters. Now, as you see, one set of protesters are walking toward the path, the other set is coming back. They have faced the tear gas. It is extremely a tragic situation. Tear gas against your own.
अभी तक यहाँ पर हम देख पा रहे हैं लोग ले करके आए हैं और एक बार फिर आगे बढ़ने की तैयारी हो रही है। ये इस सड़क पे जो भीड़ है, जो गाल फेस पे प्रदर्शनकारी थे, जो पश्चिमी कोलंबो में थे, जो उत्तरी कोलंबो में थे, वो सब भी उतर करके कोलंबो 7, कोलंबो 8, कोलंबो 4 जहाँ प्रदर्शन हो रहा था, वो सब अब इस इलाके पर पहुँच रहे हैं। धक्का मुक्की नहीं हो रही है प्रदर्शनकारियों और सेना के बीच में। और देखिए, कुछ प्रदर्शनकारी सैनिकों के साथ ही खड़े हो गए वहाँ दीवार पर। वो भी कह रहे हैं कि अच्छा नीचे रुकिए, उस पार नहीं आना। बातचीत हो रही है और पानी मांग रहे हैं। कई सारे जवानों की आंखें जल रही हैं तो एक दूसरे की मदद भी कर रहे हैं। उसके पास जो चौकी है, देखिए उसमें भी प्रदर्शनकारी चढ़ गए हैं। यानी ये सामंजस्य, देखिए ये तमाम सैनिकों को पानी देने की कोशिश और इनकी आंखें जल रही है, वो भी प्यासे वहाँ पर खड़े हैं। तो मारपीट की नौबत नहीं है, धक्का मुक्की की नहीं है, गोली चलाने, लाठी डंडे की नौबत नहीं है। लेकिन जो असमंजस इस बात का है कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे आंतरिक प्रेसिडेंट ना बने, बल्कि सीधे स्पीकर को ही जो है राष्ट्रपति बनाया जाए। तो संवैधानिक संकट, राजनीतिक संकट यहाँ पर बना हुआ है। लेकिन लोग नहीं चाहते थे, जो कुछ हुआ है वो उनके मर्जी के खिलाफ हुआ है। शायद ये विरोध इसी बात का है। लेकिन इस स्थिति में भी परिवर्तन हो सकता है। अगर मान लीजिए प्रधानमंत्री कार्यवाहक राष्ट्रपति न बनना चाहें, ऐसी स्थिति में स्पीकर को ही चार्ज लेना होगा। लेकिन ये निर्भर करता है रानिल विक्रमसिंघे पर कि वो आखिर क्या फैसला लेंगे। फिलहाल तो फैसला उन्होंने पदभार संभालते ही आदेश दिए हैं। पश्चिमी प्रोविंस में कर्फ्यू लगाया गया है, श्रीलंका में आपातकाल लगाया गया है। सड़कों पर झड़प की तस्वीर हम देख रहे हैं। प्रदर्शनकारी अब लाखों की संख्या में बढ़ रहे हैं सीधे प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय पर, और ऊपर हेलीकॉप्टर के जरिए जो निगरानी हो रही है वो सब हम देख रहे हैं। ये बिल्कुल वही तस्वीर है जो 9 जुलाई को इसी कोलंबो में घटित हुई थी। आज उसी की पुनरावृत्ति है। प्रदर्शन करने लोग निकले, सैनिकों ने रोकने की कोशिश की, रोक नहीं पाए। उन्होंने संवैधानिक जो संस्थाएं थी, प्रधानमंत्री राष्ट्रपति का घर, उनके दफ्तर पर कब्जा कर लिया। और शायद एक कोशिश हो रही है कि वो यहाँ पर भी प्रवेश कर जाए, क्योंकि इकलौती यही संस्था है जो इस समय काम कर रही है जहाँ से निर्देश जारी हो रहे हैं। ये रास्ता बनाने की कोशिश हो रही है। ये देखिए इशारा किया जा रहा है ताकि ये गाड़ी यहाँ से निकल सके। दरअसल ये पानी लेकर के आए थे, पानी, मास्क और खाने के पैकेट लेकर के आए थे, फूड पैकेट लेकर के आए थे अपने साथियों के लिए जो यहाँ आंदोलन कर रहे हैं इस भरी गर्मी में। सरकार ख्याल रहे, देखिए कई सारे प्रदर्शनकारी हैं, ये गैस मास्क लेकर के आए। इससे बचने की कोशिश की जा रही है कि टीयर सेल जो अगर फायर होता है, और देखिए सिर्फ गैस मास्क ही नहीं,
report talking about how things are going out of hand. Chaturanga continues to be with us. Chaturanga, I was asking you if you could get in a protester and ask him about the current situation about Ranil Wickremesinghe taking over as the acting president.
Yeah, let me try to talk to a protester here as well. But what is happening is there are a few things happening in this location. Apart from the military and the police firing tear gas, the people are in fact moving towards the Parliament building in also just outside Colombo to go and sort of ask for the resignation of Prime Minister, now acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe. They are moving towards the Parliament complex, and the helicopter that was flying over the heads of the people here has moved to the protest site near Golface, and there are visuals coming in from that area as well, showing that the helicopter is moving over the heads of the people there as well. So whether it's a sort of a reconnaissance information gathering mechanism or it's an intimidation mechanism of the military, I do not know, and I do not have the expertise to tell you that. But something, in fact, the military doing this is in fact something that was seen during the time of the war.
This was seen during the time of the war. That's an important and a crucial analogy that you draw, Chaturanga, that the manner in which the police and the military have really occupied this entire city just speaks volumes of the seriousness of the current situation. Though to tell our viewers that currently what we are picking up is that brutal force has not been used against these protesters today. Chaturanga, tear gas shells have been used and water cannons have been used against these protesters, but the sentiment really is that their anger, the anger of the people, the protesters really is justified. they were expecting the president to at least resign. The man chose to flee to the Maldives, isn't it, without resigning?
Yeah. So the understanding, as you very rightly say, the people had been demanding for the two things that they were demanding was for the president to resign and the prime minister to resign. And as you say, the people who have gathered here are very strong about their sentiment about the Rajapaksas. They were very strong about their sentiment that they made towards the appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe as the prime minister. And now to hear or know that the prime minister, who did not have the mandate of the people, who was merely a nationalist MP in parliament, is now the acting president of the Socialist Democratic Republic of Sri Lanka, it's not anything else. It's absurd to hear. Because the people did not vote for him at the election. He only received a mere 30,000 votes in the election, and now a person who could not secure a seat in parliament is the acting president of this nation. I don't know any other way to explain the absurdity and the severity of the situation.
Well, Chaturanga, you explained that, that this is not a man that has been chosen by the people. And right now is the acting president. Ranil Wickremesinghe is not what the people chose, is not who the people chose. He was actually handpicked by Gotabaya Rajapaksa. I'm going to put out that report of my colleague Pramod Madhav as well. He sent us this ground report some moments ago.
We're currently outside the Prime Minister's office, and currently what is happening here is that Jasmine Hershel and Pranav public, which anti-police are now running away. They are the crowds who are dispersing and running away from the Prime Minister's residence. Earlier they came over here demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made the actual next president. Over here you could see, as we speak, police is using tear gas, and police are also going over there. And currently now this place, everybody is running away because of the chaos over there. The entire place has turned chaos. Police unable to control the crowd. They have used tear gas at this point. And as we speak, these were the protesters who were at Galface earlier, and now they are trying to move away from this place.
Chaturanga continues to be with us now that the acting president has essentially taken over, declared a state of emergency. What is the role of the parliament and the speaker? Chaturanga.
Yeah, the parliament and the speaker will continue to basically resolve this issue in the constitutional manner that it should be solved under. There is no point. This was what the protesters, this was what the people of this country have been saying all throughout, that if the president hands in his resignation, which is going to happen later on in the day, as far as I'm aware, that if Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe takes over as the acting president, this is exactly what will happen. There will be chaos in Colombo, and there will be chaos in the country, because the protesters are not going to go down just because there is a change of heads, because they anyway demanded for the resignation of Ranil Wickremesinghe from the outset as well. So this is not going to solve anything. So the parliament and the speaker are in fact the people who can resolve this issue in a democratic and a constitutional manner. The prime minister's resignation is what they're asking for. The prime minister now must resign, and the power can rest with the parliament. The power can be, the speaker of parliament can be appointed as the acting president for the time frame until a new president is elected. So for the 7 to 10 days that we are looking at, that we were talking about earlier in our reports, the speaker can be held as the acting president, and all of this mess. I'm not sure whether you can see this. A person is being carried on, and I'm going to switch the camera and show this to you. These are important visuals to understand the severity of the situation here. A person has been tear gas canister has hit his head, and people are rushing him to receive medical aid. And this is what is happening. These are the first acts of the Prime Minister as the acting president of our country. So what more does the Prime Minister, now the acting president, need to understand that the people don't want him here? There are military police officers walking away from the site, and people are showing their anger.
Back to you in a few moments. Pramod has some updates. Pramod, what's really going on? What more can you tell us?
Well, the situation still remains the same in front of the Prime Minister's office. People are not happy, and like we mentioned earlier, waves and waves of protesters from Golface are moving towards the spot. They are carrying their national flag with them, and they are definitely not happy with the Ranil Wickremesinghe's idea of becoming the president. This is what they are reflecting over here. For now, the helicopter which was flying over top us has stopped, and it has landed somewhere, but protesters are still coming over. They do not have the exact information as to what happened, but only one opinion when we asked them that Ranil should not become the next Prime Minister President, and for that they are coming over. On one side they are moving towards the Prime Minister's office, while another set is moving towards Golface. That way, today the day in Colombo is remaining extremely volatile.
Be with us, Pramod. I'm going to come back to you and to Chaturanga for more details in that story in a few moments. Meanwhile, we're putting out these images. These are defining images of the protests that have broken out hours after President Gotabaya fled the country. High drama has unfolded on the streets of Sri Lanka. Protesters have breached the Prime Minister's office, seeking his resignation, saying they will continue the protest until and unless both the Prime Minister and the President resign.
Earlier they came over here. Barricade. They again breached another safety barricade.
State of emergency in Sri Lanka as protesters have hit the road, marching towards Parliament, protesting the worst economic crisis that the country is facing. Sri Lankan police have fired tear gas to scatter protesters. Thousands of protesters stormed Lankan streets seeking resignation of the president, who has now fled to the Maldives. Huge face-off between protesters and security forces. These protesters went on a rampage. The Prime Minister ordered the police to arrest whoever was acting in a riotous manner. Visuals on your screen show that there's no end to the turmoil in Sri Lanka anytime soon. We continue to keep a very close eye on that story, all the developments from Colombo and Sri Lanka, where protesters have demanded the resignation of Ranil Wickremesinghe, but the Prime Minister has chosen to take over as the acting president, snowballing the protest further. Protesters say that they're not going to move from outside the residence of the Prime Minister. Remember, these are the protesters who had in fact entered the presidential palace in Colombo as well, taking over as the president fled. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is now in the Maldives, and Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, is now the acting president of Sri Lanka. Visuals on your screen are live from Colombo, right outside the official residence and the office of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, where the protesters have been tear-gassed. Evidently, there is a lot of discomfort. Water cannons have been used against the protesters as well, who are battling the worst economic crisis. The president, however, chose to abandon his people, not even sign on the resignation letter that had been drafted, and chose to flee to the Maldives. Unrest in Sri Lanka as protesters hit the streets. The army in full presence. Tear gas have been fired and water cannons have been used against the protesters. They've been lathi charged as well, but they are not relenting. They want Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe to go. There should be a democratically elected Prime Minister and President, and that the Parliament should take a call as early as Friday. Pramod Madhav is back with us. Pramod, if you could talk to the protesters, they're asking them what next. What do they now expect, given that Prime Minister has taken over as the acting president?
Well, Sneha, the situation is the same here. Like we earlier mentioned, and the crowd over here, they do not want to march. They are still upset over the fact that even though so much protest was done, they are still currently Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to be the acting president. They are not happy, definitely. This is what we could see in their face as well, and that's the reason they are constantly protesting. On the side, you could see that they are also raising the flag. Brother, like we'd like to know now, Ranil has become the acting president. What are your thoughts on it? Why are you still here? Why are you protesting?
So we are just protesting for our rights because we need our money back that was stolen. आप हिंदी में बात कर सकते हो?
हाँ ज़रूर ज़रूर बोलिए।
So हमारा पैसा हमारा सब कुछ उनके पास है। ये हमसे छीन गए हैं। तो हम चाहते हैं कि हमारा छीना हुआ सब कुछ हमें वापस चाहिए।
अभी तो रणनील विक्रमसिंघे को एक्टिंग प्रेसिडेंट हो गया, तो इसके बारे में आपके क्या करते हैं? यू विल कंटिन्यू टू प्रोटेस्ट हियर?
Protest. Yeah, we will of course continue the thing. Yeah. So what happened is this is just an illusion. This is the ruling party was always
using one or the other.
Yeah, it's people against them. It's just they are just creating this big drama to continue fool people. So what we need is new leadership, and we just need actually to get our money back. That's right.
Right. Thank you. So this is one of the protesters at this board, and they claim that they are holding the protest and still standing over here because they state that they will not accept Ranil Wickremesinghe as a new president. In fact, they are claiming that the ruling government or the people over here collude, and that's the reason. One after the other, it's the same names that are coming back, and that's why you could see also one of the person who got injured during this protest over here being taken away. So this is a situation, a volatile situation outside. This is outside the Prime Minister's office. There were like almost 20 minutes back, there were like helicopters making sorties over here, and on the other end you could see people are still raising slogans, and this place is still kind of like very volatile over there. The thing is that people are running behind, up and down. We exactly couldn't say what's happening because this is a mass crowd and nobody exactly knows what's happening at this point. All they want is that Ranil should not become the Prime Minister, the President. Over here also the crowd has gathered and they are standing, and on the other end you will see the officials on that port, and they are protesting at this side. Sir, you are protesting here. What is the next aspect here? Now Ranil has become the President. What do you want to do? Well, officially, the protesters here are also talking back against the policemen because of the attack at the protesters, and this is the thing here. As we stand, the crowd once again starts pushing forward. The crowd pushes forward, and then they get either pushed back by the police or tear gas, and then they move back, but again they keep moving forward. That's what's happening over here. For the past 1 hour, this has been the only situation at this place now.
Be with us for more. I'm coming back to you in a few moments, putting out this report that my colleague Ashutosh just sent us some time ago.
I can see the policemen or the security persons with gas masks, with tear shells, with guns are standing, but only remain a mute spectator. You heard the senior army official say that we are not stopping them. We are only requesting them do not damage the public property. But these are the barricades were placed to stop these protesters. But that seems that they totally overpowered these policemen here, and now they are marching further. Clearly, since this entire self-motivated protest is totally leaderless, there is no leader who can lead this. And of course, since the violent clashes have stopped, now they are managing also the traffic. They are allowing the vehicles to pass through, and another passage for these protesters. And this seems to be the impact when the top army officials appeal them to do not create chaos on the road. Let's not public suffer. And that seems to be how people have silently agreed to it, and they are cooperating with these agencies. The protest continues, sloganing continues, and also on the road you can see the better traffic arrangements being made by none other than but only these protesters.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken over as the acting president. Sri Lanka has gone into a state of emergency. This is the country witnessing the worst economic crisis ever. The president has fled the country. He is in the Maldives right now. And Ranil Wickremesinghe, the man who was actually handpicked by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has taken over as the acting president, not helping the situation, in fact worsening the situation, given that protesters have been saying that this is not something that they're going to be putting up with. Protesters have said that they're going to give a call for everyone to gather and come to Sri Lanka. And that Ranil Wickremesinghe and that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa both must resign by 1 o'clock today. That's the deadline. They've given them enough time, but this is a battered and bruised economy and the people have been left to fend for themselves. A country where economic crisis is in fact just snowballing to the extent that basic necessities are out of reach for the common man right now in Sri Lanka. How is the political instability going to be then resolved and eventually the economic crisis going to be ironed out? That is something that no one really has an idea about right now in Sri Lanka. But Parliament is supreme and the Speaker can intervene only if Ranil Wickremesinghe, the acting President, allows right now. But how is that also going to happen, given that Sri Lanka is in a state of emergency right now, with Ranil Wickremesinghe clinging on to power, refusing to let go. Gotabaya Rajapaksa too has not resigned before he fled to the Maldives. The people are angry, the protesters are unrelenting. Protesters there right at Ranil Wickremesinghe's house, where they are demanding that Ranil Wickremesinghe too must resign. Gotabaya Rajapaksa also must resign. Army choppers there hovering around the Prime Minister's house, but the protesters are unrelenting. Pictures of the army, in fact, army choppers hovering around the Prime Minister's house. Army presence has increased as well. In fact, what we know is that, okay, we'll in fact be going across to my colleagues in a few moments from now, but the army choppers hovering right outside the residence of Prime Minister and now acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Protesters there refusing to budge from there, and they have gathered in huge numbers in Colombo, the capital city of Sri Lanka. Utter chaos and confusion, mayhem on the streets of riot-hit Colombo, where the protesters are refusing to step down from their demands. They have been saying that there have to be resignations and that Ranil Wickremesinghe can't be taking over as the president.
और जितने टीयर शेल यहाँ से गिर रहे हैं उनको ये देखिए पूरी सड़कें लगभग गीली कर दी गई हैं। वो इसीलिए कि जैसे आंसू गैस का गोला गिरे उसको न्यूट्रलाइज किया जा सके। और अब सबकी नज़र आसमान से है कि आखिर ये गोले आ कहाँ से रहे हैं। जैसे भी आ जा रहे हैं इनको पानी डाल के बुझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये एक तरीका है जिससे भीड़ को तितर बितर किया जा सके। ये देखिए आवाज़ है दो, और ये किसी के घर पर गिरे, हैं। दरअसल गोले दागने वालों को अंदाजा भी नहीं है कि ये कहां से फेंका जा रहा है। मैं चाहूंगा फोन लाइन पर एक बार जुड़ने की कोशिश की जाए। मैं आवाज नहीं सुन पा रहा हूं स्टूडियो में किसी की। अगर एक बार कनेक्ट करने की कोशिश की, देखिए ये कपड़ा जो है ये पूरी तरह से जल चुका है। जैसे टीयर शेल यहाँ पर गिरा, इससे आग बुझाने की कोशिश की गई। अंदर वो देखिए जैसे एक टीयर शेल का गोला गिरा है, उसको उन्होंने जो डिवाइडर, जिस तरह के प्लास्टिक का इस्तेमाल डिवाइडर किया जाता है, उससे ढकने की कोशिश करते। देखिए इस टीयर शेल को फेंक दिया गया और इससे पूरे गोले को जो है कवर कर दिया गया, ताकि धुआं जो है प्रदर्शनकारियों को ये देखिए 2-2, 3-3 की संख्या में और बहुत ऊंचाई से गिर रहे हैं। यानी जहां से गोला गिर रहा है और जहां गिर रहा है, इन दोनों के बीच की दूरी जो है वो कम से कम 1000 फीट से ज़्यादा है। आप ये समझ सकते हैं कि ये मिलिट्री ग्रेड के आंसू गैस के गोले हैं। देखिए फायरिंग नहीं की जा रही, हवाई फायरिंग नहीं हो रही है, लेकिन भीड़ को तितर बितर करना, और ये जानते हैं कि आसपास की जो भीड़ है उसको ऐसे हटाया नहीं जा सकता, इसके लिए अब वो कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि आंसू गैस के गोले ही छोड़े जाएं। प्रदर्शनकारियों की संख्या दरअसल लगातार बढ़ रही है, उनकी संख्या में कमी नहीं आ रही है, इसलिए शायद हालात बेकाबू हो रहे हैं सुरक्षा बलों के लिए कि वो आखिर आगे करे क्या। फिर गोले फायर हुए हैं और ये हवाई फायरिंग, हवा में गोलियां चलाई जा रही हैं, ये हवा में गोलियां चलाई जा रही हैं, ये हवा में गोलियां चलाई जा रही हैं भीड़ को तितर बितर करने के। लेकिन प्रदर्शनकारियों को भी पता है कि नुकसान पहुंचाने की कोशिश नहीं है। ये जो हालात हैं श्रीलंका में बिगड़े हैं राष्ट्रपति राजपक्षे के देश छोड़कर भागने के बाद, और ऊपर से जब रानिल जो प्रधानमंत्री हैं उनको पदभार दे दिया गया है राष्ट्रपति का, उसके बाद से ये हालात खराब हुए हैं यहाँ पर। और जिस तरह लोग एक के बाद एक सड़कों तक पहुंच रहे हैं एक एक करके, देखिए अभी हवा में गोलियां चलाई गई हैं भीड़ को तितर बितर करने के लिए कि लोग यहां से हट सके। और भीड़ इतनी ज्यादा है, दरअसल शायद जैमर का भी इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है ताकि लोग सोशल मीडिया पर फोटो ना इस्तेमाल कर सकें, एक दूसरे को नहीं। देखिए हवा में ऐसे गोलियां फेंकी जा रही है और ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि आखिर ये चला, और जैसे गोली चली है देखिए उन्होंने डिवाइडर का इस्तेमाल किया और जाते ही उस पर जो है सीधे कवर डाल दिया। ये देखिए ये हाथ में प्लास्टिक के डब्बे, और ये उन्होंने इस डब्बे का इस्तेमाल किया और सीधा आंसू गैस के पूरा जो शेल था उसको कवर कर दिया और शेल को उठा करके वहां पीछे रिहायशी इलाके में भेज दिया। कई सारे लोग हैं जो यहाँ पर इस तरह के गैस मास्क पहन करके आए हैं। तो ये जो अब एक तरह के वॉलंटियर हैं ये अपने ही लोगों की मदद कर रहे हैं। ये जो फेस मास्क है ये काम में आ रहा है, और ये जो प्लास्टिक का हिस्सा है इससे जो है उस शेल को कवर कर देते हैं, यानी जिसके पहले उसका प्रभाव शुरू हो, इसके पहले वो असर दिखाए गोला, वो उसको पहले ही न्यूट्रलाइज कर दे रहे हैं। और अंदर से देखिए घर किसी का है जो खुला हुआ है, तो ये पानी की बोतलें लेकर के आ रहे हैं, हर किसी को पानी की बोतलें दे रहे हैं कि अगर किसी की आंख में गोली जाए तो वो आंखों को धोएं तुरंत, गले में असर हो तो उसे। एक ऐसी जंग है लोकतंत्र की जिसमें जनता सड़कों पर सरकार के खिलाफ है, सेना सड़कों पर जनता को रोकने के लिए है, सेना जनता पर फायर नहीं कर रही है, सिर्फ तितर बितर कर रही है। जनता सेना से नाराज नहीं है, उनसे भिड़ नहीं रही है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी एक अनजाना सा संघर्ष इन सड़कों पर हो रहा है जो श्रीलंका ही नहीं बल्कि दुनिया में किसी भी लोकतंत्र के इतिहास में न कभी लिखा गया न आगे शायद कभी लिखा जाएगा। ये एक ऐसी तस्वीर है जहां पर ये लोग देश का झंडा लेकर के, अपना राष्ट्रीय ध्वज लेकर सड़कों पर हैं, क्योंकि ये लड़ाई सरकार के खिलाफ है। और ऐसे में झंडा और अपने उत्साह को लेकर के उस भावना के साथ ही आगे बढ़े हैं, लेकिन जो संघर्ष है वो फिर भी सड़कों पर तो है ही। घायल लोग हुए हैं और यहाँ पर ये स्थिति जो है ये 9 जुलाई के बाद लगातार विकराल हो रही थी। हालांकि ये अंदेशा लगातार था कि 13 तारीख को, यानी आज की तारीख में अगर इस्तीफा देखिए रह के हम सबको नजर ऊपर रखनी पड़ती है, क्योंकि ये जो मिलिट्री गेट के आंसू गैस के गोले ये कब आएंगे, कहाँ से आएंगे, किस पर गिरेंगे नहीं। और देखिए एक गाड़ी आई फिर भरकर पानी लेकर के आई थी, और जैसे उसने वितरण किया, और ये चूंकि ये समझिए फ्रंट लाइन है, ये आगे तक जाता है, इसलिए इनकी आंखों पर आप चश्मे मास्क देख पा रहे हैं। और अगले 20 मिनट में ये अगली खेप लेकर के फिर लौटेंगे। और यहाँ से अब अचानक जो हेलीकॉप्टर था, एयरफोर्स का हेलीकॉप्टर था वो हेलीकॉप्टर अब इस समय गाल फेस जो प्रोटेस्ट साइट है राष्ट्रपति दफ्तर का, वहां पर हॉवर कर रहा है इस इलाके से जाने के बाद। अब यहाँ एक तरह से ये कहें कि हालात काबू से बाहर तो हैं, मतलब काबू नहीं किया जा सकता, लेकिन ऐसी हिंसा नहीं है जिसको लेकर के कि यहाँ की सरकार फिक्र करे। लोग बस विरोध जताना चाहते हैं, नहीं चाहते, वो चाहते। ये देखिए फिर से फायर किया गया है, ये देखिए धाड़ 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 हवाई फायर की आवाज आ रही है, हवा में गोलियां चलाने की आवाजें। करीबन 10 से 12 राउंड हवा में गोलियां चलाई गई हैं। और ये अगर इन गोलियों के बाद, इसके बाद जो हो रहा है, हम पूरा घटनाक्रम जो देख रहे हैं, जो समझ रहे हैं, वो ये कि जैसे हवा में गोलियां चलाई जाती हैं 30 सेकंड के भीतर आंसू गैस के गोले फेंके जाते हैं, और वो गोले फिर इस तरफ जो प्रदर्शनकारी हैं, जो जनता है, उनके बीच गिरती है। अब देखिए उन्होंने भी एक रणनीति अपनाई है कि वही आंसू गैस के गोले उनकी ओर वो लौटा देते हैं। इस संकट के बीच में यहाँ पर जो सड़कों पर एक गिरिल्ला वॉर की तरह दिखाई पड़ रहा है। जनता जो ट्रेन नहीं है, लेकिन आंसू गैस के गोलों से उनका सामना हो चुका है पिछले 96 दिनों में प्रदर्शन के दौरान, इसलिए उन्हें अब ये एक ट्रिक, ये रणनीति पता है कि आखिर इससे कैसे बचा जा सकता है। और इसीलिए देखिए हाथों में पानी लेकर के, कपड़े गीले करके, नाक पर आंखों पर बांध के, चश्मे लेकर के, और कई सारे देखिए हम कुछ फोटोग्राफर देख पा रहे हैं, ये स्थानीय मीडिया से जुड़े हुए लोग हैं, इनके पास भी गैस मास्क है। मतलब इन्होंने इस संघर्ष को इतने करीब से देखा है कि ये गैस मास्क अब शायद ये हिस्सा बन चुका है। उनको पता है कि ये इस तरह का सामना हो सकता है, और जब आंसू गैस के गोले चलेंगे तो वो पहचानेंगे तो नहीं किसी को। इसीलिए देखिए अपनी सुरक्षा के लिए लोगों ने पहले से ही तैयारी कर रखी है। हालांकि नेटवर्क कंजेशन यहाँ बहुत ज्यादा है, कई बार लोगों से बात करना सुनना बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा है। और भीड़ जो है ये देखिए, यहाँ अगर आप कुछ देख पा रहे हैं तो सिर्फ नारेबाजी से एक दूसरे का उत्साह बढ़ाया जा रहा है ताकि लोग मोर्चा ना छोड़ें। यानी कल तक जहाँ जमावड़ा था वो जगह वीरान हो चुकी है, जहाँ किसी को आना जाना नहीं था, सारी भीड़ यहाँ पहुंच चुकी है। और ये बस सिर्फ नारेबाजी करते हुए यहाँ पर जमे हैं सबसे वीवीआईपी इलाके में, जहाँ प्रधानमंत्री का कार्यालय है। सिर्फ देशी मीडिया ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी विदेशी मीडिया भी समय यहाँ मौजूद है, जो श्रीलंका के लोकतंत्र के इस अध्याय को पढ़ रही है, देख रही है।
We'll straight to Chaturanga, who is also now getting us more details on that. It does appear that the protests have intensified after the Prime Minister took over as the acting president, and the army is also sprung into action. The army choppers right outside the Prime Minister's residence, of course, trying to send a message to the protesters who continue to stay on, isn't it? They aren't going anywhere.
Yes, you're right, Sneha. The protesters are not backing down. There is a line of army soldiers here. This is about 500 meters away from the Prime Minister's office where Pramod is joining you from. And there is a military line here, and the people are showing their discontent towards the army here as well. There are journalists gathering here. At least 2 buses of army personnel were brought to this location a short while ago. At least 2 buses of police STF were brought here, and they are lining up in this location, blocking any more people from joining the protest site and walking towards the Prime Minister's office. To be very honest, these are very disturbing scenes coming in from this location. The military emergency law has been, basically there is a curfew here in Sri Lanka. As I discussed earlier, the first act of the acting president was to impose curfew in the western province, and he has also asked any people acting in a riotous manner to be arrested. And I don't know whether there will be enough holding cells for the Sri Lanka police to arrest all of these people who have gathered, and this is their democratic right to ask for the resignation of a person who did not have a mandate being elected as the president. So still, even as we speak, people are walking towards this protest site, but they are not able to go away, move away from this location, because there's a line of military officers standing by, and the military is asking for the people to, they're not engaging with the crowd as of yet, but where Pramod is standing, you can very clearly see that tear gas is being fired into the crowd.
Chaturanga, I also want to ask you, given that there is a state of emergency in Sri Lanka right now, what is going to be the role of the parliament, and is the role of the speaker also limited right now, given that the people, these protesters here, were looking at the parliament, were turning towards the parliament to do what they want to be done, essentially have a democratically elected government, isn't it?
Yes, correct. The parliament has a lot of stay in this moment, because these are volatile times. Because in fact, if I'm to take you back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, the parliament consists of public representatives who have been elected by the people, and even the speaker, basically the legislature holds ground here in this situation, because the acting president of the country has not received his position through any mandate that the people have given him. So the parliament of the country holds ground. But what will happen when there is an emergency law that is being imposed and there is military involvement here is not clear at the moment.
Chaturanga getting us all of those details to tell our viewers. Sri Lanka is in a state of emergency right now is what we know. The role of the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has been extended to the acting president. He's declared himself the acting president and also a state of emergency in Sri Lanka. What does this really mean for the people? Political instability continues in Sri Lanka. The economic crisis also is snowballing, essentially, with no relief for the people battling inflation, the worst kind in weeks and months together that we have seen. Meanwhile, the police and the army trying to bring the situation under control using tear gas shells and water cannons at the protesters. We'll continue to keep a very, very close eye on all the developments from Sri Lanka. In a few moments from now, we're staying with these pictures as we slip into a short commercial break here.
Shots in the air is being fired here in Colombo. Multiple tear shells. This is to disperse the crowd. Look at these amount of tear shells fired here in Colombo. Similar pictures we are seeing at Ground Zero here in Colombo.
आ गई। कैसा रहा दिन?
बहुत अच्छा।
कोई वीडियो गेम कवर करने गई थी ना?
वीडियो गेम नहीं माँ, ई-स्पोर्ट्स।
ई-स्पोर्ट्स?
माँ, ई-स्पोर्ट्स is just like any other competitive sport. इसमें ना वो सब फीलिंग्स है जो किसी भी और स्पोर्ट्स में है। इसमें इमोशन है, इसमें एंगर है, इसमें सैडनेस है, इसमें हैप्पीनेस है, इसमें कमराडरी है। ये सिर्फ गेम नहीं, ये ई स्पोर्ट्स का प्रीमियर लीग ESPL है।
You are watching watching.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.
wastage is not just a social problem, but an environmental one too. It is important to take concrete steps to ensure food wastage is avoided at all costs. Why we shouldn't waste food? When we waste food, we waste the labor, the effort, investment, and precious resources. It also increases greenhouse gas emissions and contributes to climate change. What you can do? Reduce. Be more mindful of food you buy what you use, and use it all. Improve food storage and reduce wastage at home. Reuse. If you don't eat everything you make, freeze it for later. Use the leftovers as an ingredient in another meal. Recycle. Recycle as much as possible. Try composting and put nutrients back into the soil. You can also start your own green patch of fruits, vegetables, or herbs. With these easy ways, you can reduce food wastage and become a food hero.
Co-powered by The World Comes Together at Sharda University. In association with Green Lamb Laminates. Har Gustakhi Saaf.
Massive escalation on Lanka crisis. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe takes over as interim president as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa flees to Maldives, imposes state of emergency and curfew amid protests. A dramatic standoff on Colombo streets. Massive march of protesters breached Prime Minister's office. Forces fire tear gas shells. Army choppers hover over the stair site as well as the Prime Minister's office.
सारी कोशिशें नाकाफी साबित हो रही हैं। यहाँ कुछ भी देख पाना मुश्किल है। ये एक टीयर शेल ठीक मेरे पास गिरा बिल्कुल यहाँ पे। कुछ भी देख पाना यहाँ पर मुश्किल है।
And India Today reports live from Lankan crisis zone. Our reporters braved the tear gas shells and the crackdown to give you unmatched coverage right here on India Today.
Earlier there was... the police is firing on the protesters. They were suddenly started marching toward the Prime Minister residence. Multiple tear shells and air, the shots in the air is being fired here in Colombo. Suddenly I saw all the protesters walking. The moment they got to know that President has fled, now they're demanding Prime Minister to resign. This is the Prime Minister's office. They all started marching. There was a barricade. They're just trying to breach the barricade. Suddenly they started firing tear shells. Look at the other.
An NCB's damning charge sheet in Sushant Singh Rajput's case. Narcotics Control Bureau says late actor's girlfriend, Rhea Chakraborty, pushed him into addiction, used his money to buy and supply narcotics. And Moosewala murder mastermind Lawrence Bishnoi spills murder Salman Khan plot. Says plotted hit on Bollywood superstar in 2018 for killing the sacred black buck. And Mumbai fights early morning waterlogging after torrential rain. 69 dead in Gujarat after fifth day of rain havoc. Flood situation quite grim in Telangana as well. You're watching India Today's continued coverage. I'm Nabila Jamal. Sri Lanka now in a state of emergency. Let's take a quick look at all the most defining images of the protests that have broken out hours after President Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled Sri Lanka. Protests have broken out in the capital city of Colombo hours after President Rajapaksa fled the country. Thousands of protesters took to the streets amid the worst turmoil the island nation has ever faced. Angry protesters stormed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's Colombo office, demanding that he follow President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in resigning. This comes just days after his home was set afire by those protesters, now frustrated, wanting a new regime change.
And the police at this point, public police is using tear gas. And police are also going over there.
widespread protests against Prime Minister and the President of Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan Air Force helicopter was seen flying low near the protest site. This happened for the first time since protests began against the government. Security forces were seen using tear gas shells and water cannons to disperse the crowd when they tried to enter the Prime Minister's office, urging him to resign along with President Rajapaksa. And as we see here, huge face-off between protesters and security forces as protesters went on a complete rampage across the country. An indefinite curfew has also been imposed across the western province, including Colombo, to contain these growing protests. We're clearly looking at those protesters overpowering the military at this point. The visuals are certainly damning and upsetting for a country like Sri Lanka facing a situation like this for the first time. It seems like a complete economic meltdown. And out of frustration and desperation, we see the public, the citizens of Sri Lanka out on the streets condemning the regime that failed them. According in their view, the regime has failed them. They don't want Gotabaya Rajapaksa to continue. They want his resignation in no time from now. In fact, the president was due to resign, but instead chose to flee the country along with his family to Maldives. The resignation stays, but Gotabaya Rajapaksa seems to have run away from the situation at this point. We understand that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe now, as he takes over as interim, this hasn't satisfied the population of Sri Lanka as yet. Condemning this move, they want the Prime Minister Wickremesinghe also now to resign with immediate effect. India Today, the only channel on ground, bringing you the latest, these live visuals coming in from different parts of Sri Lanka. This Colombo, where we're seeing enraged protesters trying to find justice and a solution, if anything, for this desperation, the currently basic necessities that they're not able to afford. A huge economic meltdown, which it seems like the government foresaw, but wasn't able to handle it in time. We're looking at Sri Lanka now declaring a complete state of emergency, imposing a curfew across the country, particularly in the western province of the country, after their president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, fled the country. In fact, protests broke out in the capital city of Colombo after Rajapaksa decided to flee the country on a military plane early this morning. This has further led to huge agitations. Protesters very furious with the fact that first the regime failed them and now the president decides to run away. He's literally fled the country, moved in a military helicopter, a military plane rather, with his family to Maldives. At this point, even though much of his aides, many of them who are still in Sri Lanka, claim that the resignation stays, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is going to tender his resignation. But for now, yes, owing to the overwhelming protests and the kind of targeted protests at this point against the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the family has decided to flee the country. We're seeing the military now trying to take control, but so far hasn't really looked like the military is able to contain these agitators. At this point, they've certainly overpowered the military personnel in numbers. And quite evidently so, with this economic meltdown, basic necessities in absolute scarcity. We're looking at citizens of Sri Lanka coming out on the streets condemning this dire situation and asking for a regime change at the earliest. We're seeing huge face-off between protesters as well as security forces. Protesters now going on a rampage. And these are live visuals coming in from different parts of Colombo, where we see protesters there hitting the streets. In fact, at one point, it was quite violent. The military trying to contain the situation without using brute force. At the end of it, the situation of these citizens, understandable as basic necessities, including food, in absolute scarcity at this point for people of Sri Lanka. Ashutosh Mishra, our India Today correspondent, who has been on ground in Sri Lanka, relentlessly giving us those live reports right from the start of the day. Let me quickly cut across to Ashutosh as he takes us through the situation on ground.
I can see the policemen or the security persons with gas masks, with tear shells, with guns are standing, but only remain a mute spectator. You heard the senior army official say that we are not stopping them. We are only requesting them do not damage the public property. But these are the barricades were placed to stop these protesters. But that seems that they totally overpowered these policemen here. And now they are marching further. Clearly, since, this entire self-motivated protest is totally leaderless. There is no leader who can lead this. And of course, since the violent clashes have stopped, now they are managing also the traffic. They are allowing the vehicles to pass through and another passage for these protesters. And this seems to be the impact when the top army officials appeal them to do not create chaos on the road. Let's not public suffer. And that seems to be how people have silently agreed to it, and they are cooperating with these agencies. The protest continues, sloganing continues, and also on the road you can see the better traffic arrangements being made by none other than but only these protesters.
All right, that's Ashutosh. Let me quickly cut across to a local reporter from there, Chituranga, who's been giving us those live updates and also the true sentiments of the people of Sri Lanka at this point. Chituranga, in the latest, what exactly are the citizens of Sri Lanka demanding? We know that Gotabaya Rajapaksa has left. He's fled the country at this point. Not only has he let them down with this economic meltdown, he's also run away from the situation at this point instead of standing up and facing it. What exactly are the demands of the citizens of Sri Lanka at this point? What's the emergency or an urgent solution that's needed right here?
The emergency solution that is needed is very clear, and that is for the Prime Minister to step down from his position. He is now holding on to the position of acting president. Now, this is another constitutional mess. The current president of the country, that is Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has only fled the country. He has not resigned from his presidency as of yet. He is in another country. He is currently in Maldives, as we are aware, and is trying to fly into the Middle East. But he's still the current president of Sri Lanka. So how can there be an acting president when the current president is still holding on to power? Is something that cannot be understood, at least from my perspective, at least from the knowledge that I have about our constitution.
We've heard some of the supporters of Gotabaya Rajapaksa who say that the resignation stands. He's committed to resigning. He's left the country because he and his family fear for life.
But just because the president leaves the country, the country has not seen his resignation letter. Whether the speaker has not confirmed that he has received the letter of resignation as of yet. So how does a person with when there is a president in the country, yes, he will resign. That is for sure. He has announced his resignation. Unless he changes his mind halfway through, he will resign. But when there is a president acting, how can an acting president be appointed is the question that I have to ask at this point in time. Whether there is a legal basis for it, I'm not sure. But to explain to you what is happening behind me, right where I'm standing, I joined you earlier, there was a line of military personnel, army soldiers standing here, basically as a fence to stop the people from going this side. And there were arguments, there were discussions with the military here, and the army line that was standing here has now moved further back. There was tear gas firing onto this side of the road as well. So earlier when your ground reporter was reporting you, he's about 300 meters away from this location in front of the Prime Minister's office. And I'm about 300 meters away. There were tear gas being fired at this location as well. And there are still police officers standing here behind me. And the people are trying to sort of voice their discourage towards the police and are asking how can you enact the orders of an acting president who does not have a mandate. So the police are also standing by here. We see a serious number of military personnel also here at this location, a bit further
away from where I am. That is the ground situation. Earlier on, we saw military vehicles coming here, buses with army personnel coming here. And now, from where I am, the situation for the moment seems to have sort of reduced in terms of its severity. But we cannot tell whether this will prolong, because as time goes on, there might be other updates coming in. There is okay, now there I can see people running towards the Prime Minister's office. There is some thing happening on that side. I'm going to myself walk towards the Prime Minister's office and have a look at what's happening on that side as well.
All right, at this point, from what we hear, that Rajapaksa was due to resign today, the 13th of July, but somehow he's got help from a senior leader in Maldives, and he's managed to flee from the country, from Sri Lanka, along with his entire family. His wife, two bodyguards, they've all moved to Maldives at this point. But Rajapaksa was supposed to resign July 13th, which is today, and which is why we see the citizens there furious. Ashutosh on ground, taking us through exactly what's happening there. Ashutosh, over to you.
लेकिन ये जो पिछले 6 महीनों की तस्वीरें हम यहाँ देख रहे हैं सड़कों पे, इसका बीज राजपक्षे परिवार, उनकी सरकार द्वारा ही बोया गया है। देखिए, सीधी बात है, अगर पेट में आग है, भूख है, तो भूख न धर्म पहचानेगी, न सरकार पहचानेगी, न ये अपना देखेगी। तो ये स्थिति क्यों बनी है? ये उनकी गलत नीतियों के चलते। थोड़ा योगदान कोविड का भी कह सकते हैं। संडे ब्लास्ट के बाद जो है पर्यटन यहाँ पर घट गया था, ऊपर से इस देश पर इतना कर्ज, तो कुल मिला के जो ऐसी नीतियाँ थी उसने इनको इस हाल पर किया। लेकिन उससे भी ज़्यादा आरोप ये है कि राजपक्षे परिवार ने भ्रष्टाचार बहुत किया। जो भी बड़े इन्वेस्टमेंट थे, जो भी बड़ी नीतियाँ जहाँ लागू करनी थी, या तो अपना राजनीतिक लाभ देखा या अपना आर्थिक लाभ देखा। उसके चलते देश पे संकट खड़ा हो गया, और ये उसी की बानगी है कि आज उसके बाद नतीजा वही है कि देखिए कि सड़कों पर आज जो है ये जो शांति प्रिय लोग हैं वो अब सड़कों पर उतरे हैं। हालांकि ये जो सब तस्वीर हम देखते हैं ये शायद ही कहीं देश में दिखाई दे कि अगर जनता, सेना, सरकार, पुलिस के आगे खड़ी है तो वायलेंट क्लैश होते हैं। कई देशों में गोलियां चलाई जाती हैं। यहाँ सुबह से जितनी गोलियां चली हैं वो हवा में चली हैं। जो लोग घायल हुए हैं वो भगदड़ में हुए हैं। सेना, पुलिस की ओर से टीयर शेल चलाए जा रहे हैं ताकि उनको जो है, ये देखिए एक और जो है यहाँ पर प्रदर्शनकारी घायल हुई है लड़की, उनको ले जाने की कोशिश की जा रही है। कम से कम 40 से 50 लोग अब तक मैं अपने सामने देख चुका हूँ जो घायल हुए हैं, जिन्हें बारी बारी ले जाया जा रहा है। और वो स्थिति होती है, वो चाहते हैं कि प्रधानमंत्री के कार्यालय पर कब्जा ना हो। अब हमें जो जानकारी प्रधानमंत्री दफ्तर से दी गई वो ये कि अभी तक रानिल विक्रमसिंघे ने बतौर राष्ट्रपति कार्यभार नहीं संभाला। उन्होंने एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑर्डर पर दस्तखत नहीं किए हैं। वो इसलिए भी कि उनको समझ में आ रहा है कि अगर ऐसा होता है तो लोगों का गुस्सा फूटेगा और स्थिति और विकट हो सकती है। यहाँ पर जब लोग पहुंचे हैं, आर्मी उनके दफ्तर जो है वहां पर खड़ी है। अब सेना खड़ी है, एयरफोर्स के कमांडो खड़े हैं, स्पेशल फोर्सेस खड़ी हैं। वो कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि लोग ऊपर ना चढ़ें। लोग ऊपर चढ़ गए तो उन्हीं सैनिकों के साथ वो गले मिल रहे हैं। अंदर से टीयर शेल छोड़ा जाता है ताकि दफ्तर पर आगे ना बढ़े, दरवाजा ना टूटे। हवा में गोलियां चलाई जा रही हैं। प्रदर्शनकारी पीछे हटते हैं, वो टीयर शेल मारते हैं, ये उन्हें वापस लौटाते हैं। जब इनकी आंखें जलती है तो वही पुलिस सैनिक इनको पानी देके आंखें पोंछती हैं। जब वहाँ सैनिकों की आंखें जलती हैं तो यही सारे लोग उनकी ओर पानी की बोतलें भी फेंक रहे हैं। मतलब जब हमने अभी सेना के जो बड़े लेवल के अधिकारी थे, मेजर जनरल स्तर के, उनसे जब पूछा, उन्होंने कहा देखिए हम हिंसा नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम फायर नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम इनसे सिर्फ इतनी अपील कर रहे हैं कि सार्वजनिक संपत्ति को नुकसान न पहुंचाएं। तो एक सैनिक की जो ड्यूटी है कि प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय पर हमला ना हो, उनको नुकसान ना पहुंचे, वो संवैधानिक दायित्व है, उसको तो निभा रहे हैं। लेकिन साथ साथ वो यहाँ प्रदर्शनकारियों पर वैसी सख्ती नहीं दिखा रहे हैं जो आमतौर पर होती है। और ये बात प्रदर्शनकारी समझते हैं कि ये जो सैनिक है पीछे जो वर्दी में है वो उन्हीं का भाई, अपना बच्चा, अपना बेटा है। इसीलिए उनके साथ वो एक आपसी तालमेल दिखाई पड़ता है। तो ये एक लोकतंत्र की ऐसी लड़ाई, इसीलिए मैंने कहा कि ये न कभी देखी गई होगी, शायद ही कभी ऐसी देखी जाएगी। ये सड़कों पर सरकार के खिलाफ है। सेना की ड्यूटी है कि वो सरकार में जो लोग हैं उनको बचाए। रानिल विक्रमसिंघे देश छोड़कर नहीं जाना चाहते। अभी तक ऐसे कोई संकेत उन्होंने नहीं दिए हैं, और ना ही जनता उनसे इस कदर नाराज है कि वो उनकी जान के पीछे पड़ जाए। वो चाहती है कि वो राष्ट्रपति ना बने, चुपचाप किनारे बैठे। उनको जनता का समर्थन बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं है। लेकिन नई सरकार बनेगी, उसके बाद ही श्रीलंका में स्थिरता आएगी, और स्थिरता के बाद लोग भी 6 महीने से साल भर का समय नई सरकार को देंगे कि इस आर्थिक संकट को दूर किया जाए। लेकिन उससे पहले राजनीतिक संकट दूर हो। लेकिन ये जो तस्वीरें हैं, रह रहकर या तो हवा में गोलियां या तो टीयर शेल, तो एक तरह का गुरिल्ला वॉर जो है वो यहाँ आइलैंड में चल रहा है। ये हिंसक नहीं है, लेकिन जो कुछ भी हो रहा है ये सरकार को भी असमंजस में डाल रहा है कि आखिर रास्ता कैसे निकलेगा। आर्थिक संकट तो अब दूर
There's a big breaking news coming in from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka Speaker appoints Ranil as the acting president. Ranil Wickremesinghe has been appointed as the acting president. Remember, this comes even before President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has formally resigned. The formal resignation has not come in as yet, which is what has irked the population at large in Sri Lanka. But yet, the Speaker has taken the decision to appoint Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting president. This is precisely what it appears that the people of Sri Lanka are right now condemning, that even before the resignation that's come in formally of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, here is Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's been appointed as the acting president of this country. Sri Lanka's Speaker now appoints Ranil as the acting president. In fact, we're looking at Gotabaya Rajapaksa at a point when he was cornered by the population, the citizens of Sri Lanka, his own people. He decided to flee the country, got on a military plane with his wife. 2 bodyguards has landed in Maldives. At this point, he's currently lodged there. He's literally run away from the situation that prevails in the country, a huge economic meltdown where basic necessities, resources in absolute scarcity for the people of Sri Lanka. Food has become a task for them to access. No money in the country at this point. There's a huge demand, barely any money or power to purchase, expenses skyrocketing. At this point, the poor in Sri Lanka, largely almost most of the population, in fact, right now completely blown and affected by this huge economic meltdown. At this point, the president has decided to flee the country, while now the speaker has stepped in to appoint Ranil Wickremesinghe, the acting interim president in the meanwhile. Now, will this really help the situation at this point in Sri Lanka? That remains to be seen. But President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was indeed supposed to resign, and that resignation was to come today, the 13th of July. That was the assurance and promise that Gotabaya Rajapaksa had given. And once Gotabaya had resigned, as per the Sri Lankan constitution, the Prime Minister is ideally sworn in as the interim president until the parliament elects a candidate from among its members. So it appears now the Speaker has decided that Ranil Wickremesinghe will be the acting president until the situation settles and there's a formal election. In fact, this is the situation in Sri Lanka. At this point, the Speaker had to step in, looking at the crisis. A huge meltdown, economic meltdown that's resulted in frustrated citizens coming to the streets, condemning the regime that was the government that was run by the Rajapaksas. At this point, they're feeling completely let down, the citizens. All the more making it worse was President Rajapaksa, who literally fled the country on a military plane, has now landed in Maldives to try and seek some kind of refuge. At this point, he's claimed threat to his life. He and his wife, 2 of his bodyguards, all of them have flown down to Maldives with the help of, it appears, senior leaders of the Maldivian government. At this point, the Rajapaksas have taken some kind of safety in Maldives while people there storm into the president's palace, and all kinds of arson that we've reported to you right here on our screens with citizens of Sri Lanka there. Quite violent at this point, despite the military being in large numbers present there all across Colombo. It appears that citizens have outnumbered the military. It's also difficult for the military now to clamp down on these agitators, considering sentiments, emotions running high because of desperation. Even the military quite clearly there understands that at this point, Sri Lankan people have barely any food to feed their family. They are in a very desperate situation, and out of frustration and anger, they're out on the streets. Military also handling this situation very carefully, not using any brute force, but of course trying with their presence and patience there to calm the situation, but seems like it's so far gone out of hand. Remember, this has gone on for over 2 months now, and yet doesn't seem like the government had any formula or solution to stabilize the situation. At least in the last 2 months, it's gotten only worse. And now, with the Speaker appointing Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting president, doesn't seem like that's going to settle the situation for the moment now for people of Sri Lanka. In fact, they're further infuriated, agitated with the fact that Gotabaya Rajapaksa himself has fled the country, and they believe that this entire process of an interim president at this point is just a facade. People of Sri Lanka now absolutely angry, and in fact, out of desperation, many of them indulging in violence as well. Those are the live visuals that we see here. India Today's only team of reporters who are on ground bringing you all the latest visuals. In fact, you see citizens on one hand, many of them indulging in violence, on the other, many trying to peacefully protest, holding up flags of Sri Lanka, showing their nationalism and the love for the country, also asking for a solution with immediate effect. And to start with, they want Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign at the earliest. Not happy with Ranil Wickremesinghe now stepping in as interim president. This, of course, has only inflamed emotions at this point, as we see. Let me quickly cut across to Geeta Mohan, joining us right from the newsroom. Geeta, a quick analysis on the situation right here. Speaker now decides to jump in, has appointed Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting president. Does this stabilize the situation for the moment, or does it make it even worse? Because we see citizens aren't very happy with this solution.
Well, at the end of the day, the fact is that there is a major trust deficit, and that cannot be filled up or covered up by the kind of taking over from one leader to the other. And we see that swell of support or protest, so to say, against the leadership, any kind of leadership. That's why one is also asking whether if an all-party government would really be acceptable to the country or not. Having said that, Ranil Wickremesinghe for now is the acting president, and we will again have to wait and see how he is going to steer the nation to a point where there will be a working government, an acting all-party government that could really then look at pulling the country out of the crisis. The protests that you see are because neither Rajapaksas. Initially, we thought it was the Rajapaksas who were absolutely unacceptable to the people, and Ranil Wickremesinghe, a more acceptable candidate to lead the country out of the crisis. But now it just seems like because the entire administration where Ranil Wickremesinghe was brought in by the Rajapaksa government is the reason why the trust deficit continues. They continue to protest. They're protesting, and the massive crowd that you see, the tear gas shelling that you're seeing to dispel the crowd is certainly making things worse. Now, what is going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours is absolutely crucial. We do know that once Gotabaya Rajapaksa, now this is again an appointment that is being made without a confirmation of Gotabaya Rajapaksa having tendered his resignation. He said that he was to tender his resignation on the 13th. But now, shifting goalposts, Gotabaya or sources from media in Sri Lanka have said that he will tender his resignation once he reaches his final destination. He's right now in the Maldives, and that's not his final destination. What we're given to understand is that Dubai is his final destination. So, without having tendered his resignation, we are looking at an acting president who has been put in place. And the reason why this trust deficit, the problems and the questions that the people of Sri Lanka are asking continues. And it is not going to stop till there is some semblance of a government that actually will be looking at pulling out the country out of the crisis. Sajith Premadasa is going to be a very important man and key to how the new all-party government will be formed, because he certainly is going to push to become the new president. But he, in a statement, in an interview to a media network in Sri Lanka, has already said that he will only pitch for presidentship once Gotabaya Rajapaksa puts in his papers or resigns, and that really has not happened. So the transition is happening among the people who themselves think that they can appoint a prime minister as acting president, but it has not happened through due process. Now, due process would be once Gotabaya Rajapaksa puts in his papers, then the others will be staking claim. Now, we will again have to see whether if Ranil Wickremesinghe, or for that matter Sajith Premadasa, have the numbers and support of all the MPs. We're looking at the parliament over here to really appoint an acting president.
Right. Geeta, do stay with us. I'm going to quickly cut across to Ashutosh right there on ground, bringing us those sentiments of those people protesting. Ashutosh, over to you. What exactly, who are those people right behind you? And a quick word, Ashutosh, is this a sentiment of the larger population of Sri Lanka altogether? The entire country feels the same way, or is it a section of the society only?
Well, there is no section of society, Navila. It's the entire country, because ultimately they all have suffered for last few months, and that's exactly why were they agitating for last 6 months at least. In March particularly, you know, when this situation escalated, they came on the street. Here, look at this. This is, another level of confrontation perhaps never seen in the democracy in any country. You know, the army is deployed on the Prime Minister's office. These protesters trying to enter inside. The army is resisting, but there is a different show of strength from the armed forces. They are firing, but that in the air. They're throwing the tear shells only to disperse the crowd. Subsequently, when, the eyes are burning, the people are helping each other. And when the similar situation is back to there, because the protesters are throwing back these tear shells in the Prime Minister's office. So when they face a sense of burning, these protesters helping even the army. So clearly, it's not a battle between people and the armed forces. It's a battle, it's a political battle, a democratic battle between the protesters and the government. After all, they wanted the president to resign. They wanted Ranil Wickremesinghe should not take charge as a president. They wanted a new regime in the island. But that seems not happening. Of course, the constitutional authority and the process that has been followed, as the speaker announced Ranil Wickremesinghe to be the interim president. And of course, the legal procedure and the constitutional procedure will be followed in coming days on 19th and 20th when there will be a new government. But that perhaps the people have been agitating here. The Ranil Wickremesinghe should not be made a president, and there can be another alternative. If he refuses, the speaker can be made the interim president till the new government is formed. And that's exactly why the protest is happening. Subsequently, there is also anger that why these officials allowed. Of course, if there is certain decisions taken from the Ministry of Defence, it cannot happen without the consent of the Prime Minister's office. And how did MOD allowed Rajapaksa to flee? Because remember, when his younger brother, when his sibling Basal Rajapaksa wanted to leave country via Dubai and wanted to go to United States, day before yesterday, he was stopped at the immigration office at the international, which is called a Silk VIP corridor. So he was stopped, and since yesterday there have been a protest by the immigration staff and the entire the airport workers, and this is to prevent the exit of Rajapaksa family through the VIP route. And all seems to be going in drain when Rajapaksa used this opportunity. India Today put out this story to our viewers exclusively, that how Rajapaksa was negotiating with the opponents, sent out a message seeking a safe passage for the resignation. He said, until there is a safe passage, he won't resign. And that seems to be working. All the political executives came on consent, and that after the consensus, perhaps this permission was given by the Ministry of Defence, and hence, midnight, this all drama happened. It was given AN-32 Special Air Force craft and landed to Malé midnight. And what we are hearing, that from Malé he has gone to a private island in a private resort. But clearly there is also a huge number of Sri Lankans across Malé, across those islands. So clearly he will also face the heat even in Maldives as well. But for now, what is happening here on these streets, the protesters who were gathering at Gulf Face for more than 96. Remember, today is the 96th day of this protest, and all these protesters have vacated the protest site Gulf Face, where they gathered in the month of May. Now they all are trying to enter at the Prime Minister's office. Already the Prime Minister's official residence, Temple Tree and Presidential Secretariat and President's House, that remain under the captivity of these protesters. They continue to capture it, and they are not ready to vacate. Since the resignation has already been announced, now the Ranil Wickremesinghe is the acting president. We have to see, since they already gave ultimatum, whether in next...
Right. Ashutosh, stay with us. We know Pramod is also amid those protesters, the citizens who are really desperate to find a regime change at the earliest, not approving of the move where the speaker has appointed Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting president at this point. Over to you, Pramod.
This is the situation here. Once again, tear gas has been deployed and people are walking out. Again and again, tear gas has been deployed and people are walking out. Water seems to be helping them currently, and even you can't breathe and you can't see. This is
outside the PM's office, and here this is how the crowd is coming and dispatched by the police and the army, tear gas, and they are being sent away. But these protesters again row after row, and they're protesting that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the president again. Promo from Colombo, what are you today? Move. Keep moving. This is the situation here. Once again, tear gas has been deployed and people are walking out. Again and again, tear gas has been deployed and people are walking out. Water seems to be helping them currently, and even you can't breathe and you can't see. This is outside the PM's office, and here this is how the crowd is coming and dispatched by the police and the army, tear gas, and they are being sent away. But these protesters again row after row, and they're protesting that Ranil Wickremesinghe should not become the president again. Promo from Colombo, what are you today?
All right, we're looking at really tense situations there. Pramod Madhav, our India Today correspondent, who's right there on ground, braving all this chaos. Tear gas shells that's being fired by the army in Sri Lanka, trying to contain those protesters who are trying to barge into the Prime Minister's office at this point. They're not willing to accept any change or interim precedent, especially in the form of Ranil Wickremesinghe. They're refusing to accept any member close to the Rajapaksa regime. In fact, a huge trust deficit, as Geeta Mohan also highlighted at this point. Citizens of Sri Lanka there not trusting in the Rajapaksas and their government. Even Ranil Wickremesinghe, who ideally was known to be a mass leader or someone who had a mass appeal rather, he too now has been completely rejected by the people of Sri Lanka. They don't want him. They want him also to step down as the interim Prime Minister, not accepting of him being appointed as the interim President either. At this point, we're seeing tear gas shells being used to stop those protesters from approaching the Prime Minister's office, and even different parts of Colombo where we're seeing agitators running amok, condemning this economic meltdown, or in fact, pointing the responsibility entirely of the situation in Sri Lanka to the Rajapaksas. And anyone appointed by the Rajapaksas not approved by the citizens of the country. In fact, Ashutosh Mishra also joining us. He's right there at the spot speaking to those agitators. At this point, like we hear from our reporters, the military is, of course, very much sensitive to the emotions of their people. It's not citizens of Sri Lanka against the military at this point, even though tear gas shells have been fired. Barricades have been put in place. It's only to restrict the citizens from barging into government offices like the Prime Minister's office or the President's office. We saw over the last few days how huge population, protesters there, barged into the President's office, took pictures. It was quite shocking to see that entire government premises, especially the President's office, was infiltrated by protesters, literally ransacking the entire office. Clicking photographs and whatnot. It was a situation that showed completely out of control. A country like Sri Lanka at this point, the island nation, seeing the worst ever economic meltdown leading to this civil war kind of situation at this point. We're seeing citizens out on the streets condemning the Rajapaksas, and at this point, when ideally citizens and people of Sri Lanka would have expected the Rajapaksas to stay back, face the situation, help them rise from this desperate plight. Here is Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president, who's decided to flee the country along with his wife, 2 bodyguards on a military plane to Maldives, where he's now seeking some kind of protection. He's left claiming threat to life, and Ranil Wickremesinghe has now been appointed as the acting Prime Minister, and as per the latest, the Speaker has also appointed Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting President. This, of course, again, not going down well with the citizens of Sri Lanka who are agitating and has barely any trust in the Rajapaksas and their regime, no trust in any of their members to take control of the situation. And therefore, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's ideally looked at as a mass leader or a man with a mass appeal, he too hasn't been accepted by the people of Sri Lanka. This is certainly the worst crisis that the country is facing, and one can understand the situation at this point among the citizens as they barely have food to eat, basic necessities inaccessible. Prices have skyrocketed. There's absolutely no money with the people locally there. And therefore, at this point, out of desperation and frustration, we're seeing large populations in Sri Lanka coming out on the streets, resorting to violence in some pockets, condemning the situation in the country. All right, now let's quickly cut across to some of those developments that's taken place over the last few hours with this turmoil in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has now fled the country. He's landed in Maldives. Amid this widespread protests against him, he's fled the country hours before he was due to step down officially. He was to step down 13th of July. That was his assurance. That's today. But instead of formally progressing with that move, he's decided to flee the country in an army plane. And amid all the turmoil and protests, Speaker has announced that Prime Minister of Sri Lanka is going to be the acting President of Sri Lanka as well. Current President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is yet to resign from his post, but Ranil Wickremesinghe now, the man on your screens here, seems to be stepping in as the acting President. And further protesters have breached the acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe's office, seeking his resignation too. They don't want him to be the interim Prime Minister or the President for that matter. They want his resignation, citing the worst economic crisis, saying there's absolutely no trust in Rajapaksa and his men. Ranil Wickremesinghe now looked at as Rajapaksa's aide. In fact, we're looking at Ashutosh there, our correspondent there. Remember, tear gas shells being fired at this point. Our reporters braving all that chaos and situation to bring us factual reports from on ground. Ashutosh Mishra, we see the situation is difficult. I hope you're safe. But what do we see right behind you?
भारी संख्या मतलब गिनती भी मुश्किल है अचानक से शायद 50-60 गोले एक साथ दागे गए हैं ये देखिए इसीलिए अब किसी के लिए भी रुकना यहाँ मुश्किल है हालांकि इसके पहले एक टुकड़ी आगे बढ़ी थी सेना की और अब ये पीछे से जो गाड़ियां हैं उन्होंने इतने सारे गोले एक साथ फेंके हैं कि अब यहाँ रहना बिल्कुल मुश्किल होगा पूरी की पूरी टुकड़ी एक साथ भाग रही है और वहाँ से पुलिस और आर्मी मार्च कर रही है आगे इनको खदेड़ने के लिए और अब ये जो स्थिति है बहुत ज़्यादा लोग खांसते हैं आंखों को जलते हुए आंखों में जलन हो रही है रोते चीखते हुए भाग रहे हैं देखिए लोग घायल हो चुके हैं यहाँ पर और पीछे वो गाड़ियाँ हैं जिनके पास पानी को गुजरे की मदद कर रहे हैं ताकि वो यहाँ से निकल सके किसी तरह जान बचा करके लोग भाग रहे हैं ये मिलिट्री ग्रेड्स के आंसू गैस के गोले बहुत हमारी देखिए सड़कों पर जो आप अफरा तफरी देख रहे हैं किसी चीज़ें तितर बितर हो रखी हैं इससे अंदाज़ा लगाया जा सकता है यहाँ पर क्या हाल हुआ होगा सांस नहीं लिया जा सकता यहाँ पे और देखिए जो पिछली टीम है वो फिर आगे बढ़ी है कि जो गोले एक साथ फेंके देखिए यहाँ पर लोग घायल हुए हैं भागने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं बस यहाँ से निकलना चाहते हैं जूते चप्पल सड़कों पर पड़े हुए लेकिन ये देखिए किनारे सारे के सारे किनारे हो गए हैं सब एक दूसरे की मदद कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे और अब जो जानकारी हमें अभी स्पीकर दफ्तर से दी गई औपचारिक रूप से कह दिया गया कि हाँ एक प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस करके ऐलान किया गया है कि रानिल विक्रमसिंघे ही एक्टिंग प्रेसिडेंट होंगे सारे फैसले वही लेंगे जब तक कि दूसरे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रावधानों की और प्रक्रिया पूरी नहीं हो जाती है देखिए एक साथ ये समझना भी मुश्किल जैसे देखिए वैसे एक राहत है कि हवा की जो डायरेक्शन है वो दूसरी तरफ की है इसलिए धुआं जो है निकल जा रहा है लेकिन ये कहाँ से आ रहे हैं ये समझना भी बड़ा मुश्किल है मैं अपने कैमरा में जैसे कहूँगा कि आंख बंद ही रखें इस समय लोग आए हैं मदद करने के लिए ब्रदर ताकि लोगों की आंखों में काफ़ी जलन हो रही है ये एक ऐसा मौका है मैं चाहूँगा फोन लाइन के ज़रिए मैं संपर्क टूट गया मैं चाहूँगा संपर्क एक बार स्टैब्लिश करने की कोशिश करें ताकि मैं आपकी आवाज़ सुन पाऊँ यहाँ इस समय आपकी आवाज़ मैं नहीं सुन पा रहा हूँ फोन लाइन यहाँ पर नेटवर्क कंजेशन की वजह से लाइन ड्रॉप हो गई देखिए ये सीधी तस्वीरें प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय के ठीक बाहर जो कि अब देश के राष्ट्रपति हैं प्रधानमंत्री और राष्ट्रपति रानिल विक्रमसिंघे के घर के बाहर की तस्वीर ये जो धुआं है ये धुआं प्रदर्शनकारियों को भीड़ को तितर बितर करने के लिए किया गया है लोग आगे बढ़ रहे हैं वापस जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं सेना और पुलिस समझ नहीं पा रही है कि इसको यहाँ से हटाया कैसे जाए कई सारे प्रदर्शनकारी जो लौट के आ रहे हैं वो अब गैस मास्क पहनकर आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और उसके बाद हालात जो हैं वो लगातार ख़राब हो रहा है और देखिए अगर ऐसा ही कन्फ्रंटेशन चलता रहा तो स्थिति और उग्र हो जाएगी। लोग बचने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। देखिए, लोगों को चोट लगी है। भगदड़ जब हुई तो लोगों को चोट लगी और चोट के बाद बचे। देखिए, फिर एक राउंड, फिर भागने की कोशिश। देखिए, एक शख्स घायल हुआ है जब भगदड़ होती है और उसको चोट लगी है, खून निकल रहा माथे से। और ये देखिए, तमाम सारे लोग अब अपने लोगों को सरकार धोखा देती है। सरकार धोखेबाज, जिनको चोट लगे। देखिए, कई लोग गंभीर घायल और इन सबको नजदीकी अस्पताल या कोलंबो मेडिकल अस्पताल ले जाया जाएगा। और घायलों की संख्या लगातार बढ़ रही है, क्योंकि जब वो भीड़ इकट्ठी होती है यहाँ, वो काफ़ी संख्या में है। अब ये संख्या हज़ारों में नहीं है और इनको गिन पाना मुश्किल है। ऐसे में पतली 60-70 फुट चौड़ी जो सड़क है वो कम पड़ रही है। और ये देखिए, एक बार फिर मैं कोशिश करूँगा पैन शॉट के जरिए दिखाने की वहाँ पर जो स्थिति है। अब जो फोर्स है, जो STF है खासकर और सेना, वो सड़कों पर आ गई है। मेटल शील्ड से वो प्रोटेक्शन लाइन, एक बाउंड्री लाइन बना रहे हैं ताकि जो प्रदर्शनकारी आगे बढ़े हैं अब वो और आगे ना जा पाए। यहाँ सब कुछ संभालना बहुत मुश्किल हो गया है। लेकिन एक रणनीति जो अब यहाँ के जवानों ने अपनाई है भीड़ को तितर-बितर करने के लिए, वो ये कि जो दाएं बाएं की गलियाँ हैं, इस तरफ की गलियाँ हो, इस तरफ की गलियाँ हो, वो वहाँ पहुँच रहे हैं पीछे के रास्तों से और उन गलियों से वो टीयर शेल मार रहे हैं, यानी इधर से दाएं बाएं से, ताकि वो सड़कों पर आए और यहाँ जो भीड़ है उसको तितर-बितर करे। क्योंकि वो देख रहे हैं कि प्रदर्शनकारी अब इसको समझ पाए हैं, वो उनसे निपट ले रहे हैं। ऐसे में जो है उन्होंने भी रणनीति बनाई है थोड़ी सी आक्रामक तरीके से। ये देखिए, आंखों में, चेहरे में, हाथों में जो जलन है, कैसे एक दूसरे की लोग मदद कर रहे हैं। मैदान छोड़कर कोई नहीं जाना चाहता, हर कोई यहाँ पर डटा हुआ है। जिनको जो घायल हुए, देखिए फिर से लगातार, और AK-47 की फायरिंग हम लगातार सुन पा रहे हैं। हवाई फायरिंग बहुत सारी की जा रही है ताकि लोग डर करके पीछे हट जाएं। और वहाँ पर आप तस्वीरें देखें कि प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय पर वहाँ जो झड़प है वो नहीं रुक रही है, वो जस की तस बनी हुई है। और ये जो तस्वीरें हैं, जाहिर है श्रीलंका में कभी किसी ने ऐसा देखा नहीं होगा और शायद ही कभी किसी को देखने को भी मिलेगा, क्योंकि ये ऐसा कभी हुआ नहीं जो आज हम यहाँ सड़कों पर देख रहे हैं। ये जो स्थिति है ये बेहद चुनौती बन गई है यहाँ के सशस्त्र बलों के लिए, प्रशासन के लिए, सरकार के लिए भी, कि इन प्रदर्शनकारियों को यहाँ हटाया कैसे जाए। अब नए राष्ट्रपति आए हैं तो उनको अपना कार्यकाल संभालना है। कार्यकाल के साथ कई सारे उनको आदेश जारी करने होंगे, संवैधानिक प्रक्रिया का पालन होना है, संसद का सत्र शुरू होना है, सांसद वोट देंगे, नॉमिनेशन फाइल होगा, नामांकन होगा चेहरों का कि कौन राष्ट्रपति बनेगा। लेकिन उससे पहले जो हम सड़कों पर देख रहे हैं, ये अंदाज़ा लगाना मुश्किल है कि आज की तारीख में शाम होते होते कोलंबो की इन सड़कों पर क्या होगा। राजनीतिक संकट खत्म होगा या नहीं, क्योंकि आर्थिक संकट अब दूर की कौड़ी है। जो लोगों की मुश्किलें थी, जो सब्र का बांध टूटा है, जो उन्हें सड़कों पर लेकर के आया है, उसके बाद ये आगे क्या करेंगे ये अब समझना बहुत मुश्किल है। जब हम पहले भी कहते कि 5 मिनट में यहाँ क्या होगा ये कोई नहीं जानता। ये लोग चीखते भाग रहे हैं। एक लड़की है, वो छोटी बच्ची है, शायद वो घायल हुई है, उसको लेके लोग गोद में दौड़ के भाग रहे हैं। तो अब यहाँ पर जो स्थिति देखे, इससे भी जनता का गुस्सा बढ़ेगा। और लोग देखें, जूते चप्पल जहाँ तहाँ बिखरे पड़े हैं। इससे पता चलता है कि यहाँ जो संघर्ष है वो कितना बड़ा हो रहा है। और ये संघर्ष अब आप समझिए कि घड़ी में इस समय 1:45 बज रहे हैं। ये हालात आगे कहाँ जाएंगे, अभी पूरी शाम, पूरी रात बाकी है और कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है कि वो यहीं पर टिके रहें। ये संघर्ष न जाने कब तक चलेगा। नेहा।
All right. Well, we see Ashutosh, of course, giving us the true emotion of those people on ground. They're furious. The public is furious that not only hasn't Gotabaya Rajapaksa not resigned as yet, he's not resigned as yet, but yet taken off to Maldives to try and find safe haven. In the face of this public revolt, we're seeing Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president, I could say former, because at this point the president, interim president is Ranil Wickremesinghe, that's been appointed by the speaker. So therefore, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the question is he still the president of the country or not? At this point, he is fled to Maldives to find a safe place, considering he believes threat to life. And also, it appears that he is trying to escape any kind of arrest as the blame, the entire blame of this economic meltdown that Sri Lanka is facing for the first time in over 7 decades. The blame has been solely pinned on the Rajapaksas. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president ideally, he instead of taking responsibility or facing the situation at this point, has decided to flee the country. He's moved to Maldives to try and find safe haven. Now, Maldives, on the other end, says that Gotabaya Rajapaksa is still the president of Sri Lanka. He hasn't yet tendered his resignation. Therefore, if he wants to travel to Maldives, then we must welcome him. This is more or less a response given by Maldives at this point, when we're seeing huge protests, a civil war-like situation on the streets of Sri Lanka at this point. Instead of facing the situation, the president has literally run away. They're not happy with the interim president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's been appointed as the acting interim president. The public there, the citizens of Sri Lanka, now wanting him to resign as well with immediate effect. In fact, they don't want anybody associated with the Rajapaksas at the helm of affairs. They're pinning the entire blame on this economic crisis on the Rajapaksas, saying they couldn't handle it and they must be punished for it. In fact, at this point, we believe Gotabaya Rajapaksa also fearing that he could be arrested. If at all there is a government change and under a new government, he could certainly face arrest. He's decided to flee the country at this point, very clearly showing the intentions of the Rajapaksas, not wanting to take absolute responsibility and face the situation, instead trying to escape arrest or any kind of threat to his life and his family's life. He's decided to leave the country and literally leave his people, citizens of Sri Lanka, in a mess of such kind which they've never faced in life, in history. In fact, what we see here is Sri Lankans there in dire need of absolute basic necessities. They're certainly struggling to buy food, medicine, fuel, essentials there. Barely, in fact, absolute scarcity there of essentials. Barely any money that the people have to pay for those essentials, which are right now at exorbitant prices being offered to them. Ashutosh, who's still right there, remember our reporters, they're braving all that turmoil and chaos and that tear gas shells being fired by the army. Ashutosh brings us those live reports. Ashutosh, over to you.
Well, Nabila, this is really going to be a long battle. It's all started been hours now. And when we started walking with these protesters, all of a sudden it was spontaneous reaction. There were only few hundred. Suddenly it became few thousand. And now I cannot recall the numbers here. Just more than, 700-800 meter, this entire stretch, 70 or 80 feet, the width of this road. And that's totally crowded. That's one after one. It is really becoming difficult for the armed forces to control the crowd. Everyone just trying to enter, the protesters trying to enter the Prime Minister's office, the soldiers there, the army there, the Air Force commandos there, the STF there. They're trying to disperse the crowd. And the rounds of tear shells that have been fired here just on one day, perhaps in any country would not have been fired even, in the entire month if there is uncertainty or there is some kind of chaos. So that's what is happening here. And most, as I see, the people, the protesters are even quite trained. They're just taking their clothes away, dipped in water, soaked in water, and are just throwing over the tear shells. Several people injured, at least 50 to 60 people I've seen injured, one after one. They're helping each other. Clearly, the uncertainty and this anger is actually boiling right after these people. The shots again fired in the air. So rounds after rounds being fired by the armed forces to disperse the crowd. This is how people are injured, because there was chaotic situation when shells fired. The crowd started dispersing, and that led to the scuffle, that led to the entire situation here, and that perhaps, also causing the injuries to these protesters. Several women, children, men have been taken to the nearby hospitals. So clearly this is totally anger boiling after the speaker's announcement that the Prime Minister Wickremesinghe will be the acting president. So everyone is not even bothering about that there will be constitutional procedure will be followed in few days, and by 20th there will be a new regime. They just did not want to see Ranil Wickremesinghe as the next president. Here is another vehicle. Since the people have been in huge number, the throats are choked, eyes are choked. They are sending water to everyone. This is how to help each other, and this is self-motivated, self-funded. Everyone, every pocket of Colombo, and this is not happening only in Colombo. Perhaps why in the Western Province the curfew orders were imposed. This is happening across the country, from Hambantota to all these forces, northern, southern, eastern, western part, all. But largely people have been moving to Colombo, being its capital, and they know that if you show your strength here in the capital, the message goes clear to those in the power corridors and also across the globe. So they just want to register the protest. And what unique protest? So carrying the national flag and subsequently with these gas masks, and this is to beat the tear shells. Perhaps for last 5-6 months they have seen the situation volatile, often engage into scuffle with the armed forces. Now they all are even prepared with the glasses, with the gas mask to deal with the situation. This is just happening. We don't know yet when it is gonna stop, because clearly the situation not seeing the number of protesters that are rising here, that is giving a clue that this is perhaps another long battle. What we are seeing for 96 days at Gulf Phase, this will be another long battle stretched out. Many of them have been totally exhausted. Still here, rigid here, they are not going back home, as they warned until President resigns. They will not withdraw from the places that they vacated, including the Presidential Palace, Prime Minister's official residence. But what next at Prime Minister's house, we don't know yet. There was helicopter, Air Force chopper, therefore hovering all over, monitoring tear shells. Rounds of tear shells were fired, but still there is no sign of withdrawal by these protesters from this place.
It's of course a tough situation for the government as well, and clearly for its citizens. They've come this far, over 2 months of agitation, and they seem they're adamant that until their demands are met, they're not going to budge. At this point, India Today's reporters, band of reporters who are currently on ground, braving all that those tear gas shells and the chaos, they're bringing us those live, relentless reports. Stay tuned to India Today as I slip into a short break. We'll be right back with this relentless coverage.
Shots in the air is being fired here in Colombo. Multiple tear shells. This is to disperse the crowd. Look at these amount of tear shells fired here in Colombo. Similar pictures we are seeing at Ground Zero here in Colombo.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com or call 9999892171. Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com